Part 63. The Prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 623. As soon as Feng Qingjian's hand touched the teacup, she saw Feng Wei running towards her. She raised her head and saw Feng Wei looking at her with a smile on his face. She picked up the teacup and put it to her lips and took a few sips to moisten her throat, mainly because she was too thirsty. Feng Wei was not in a hurry when she saw him. She was very thirsty when she just regained her memory, so she waited patiently. June Mocking sat down on the couch, picked up another teacup, glanced at Feng Qingjian, raised the teacup and took 2 sips of tea. Feng Wei couldn't help but wonder when she saw her father sitting there calmly drinking tea. The last 2 times, her father went to take a bath immediately. Could it be that he was too excited and was not in a hurry to take a bath? Feng Qingjian finished drinking the tea in the teacup and found that Feng Wei was still staring at her. She put down the teacup in her hand and didn't know what to say for a moment. Feng Wei saw her put down the teacup but didn't say anything, and her reaction was mediocre. However, she remembered that Xiao Jinyan was excited when she regained her memory. When she regained her memory, she was also very excited. "Mother, why don't you speak?" Feng Qingjian looked at Feng Wei, who looked expectant, glanced at June Mocking, and coughed twice. "I have not lost my memory." Feng Wei was stunned for a moment, then asked, "What do you mean?" Feng Qingjian knew that Feng Wei would be disappointed if she told the truth, but she couldn't hide this matter. At first, she cooperated with him only because she wanted to make June Mocking give up. Now that the results are out, June Mocking and Feng Wei have to give up. She explained, "June Mocking helped me restore my memory just now, but I didn't lose my memory, so his method was ineffective." Feng Wei always believed that there was nothing his father couldn't do, but Feng Qingjian said that he didn't have amnesia and that his father's methods were ineffective, so he didn't react for a while. She was stunned for a while and looked at her father. "Dad, what's going on?" June Mocking put down the teacup and raised his eyes to look at his daughter. "Your mother's situation is somewhat special, so her memory has not been restored." June Mocking discovered something was wrong when he was halfway through helping Feng Qingjian recover her memory. After finishing the inquiry, he discovered that his method had no effect on her at all. When Feng Qingjian heard this, she turned her head and looked at June Mocking. She thought that after this experience, June Mocking would give up, but in the end, she still thought that she had lost her memory. Feng Wei was a little disappointed, but he recovered quickly. She looked at Feng Qingjian and comforted her in a gentle voice, "Don't worry, mother. Dad is very powerful. There will definitely be a way to help you restore your memory." Feng Qingjian felt that it was necessary to make one thing clear. If she didn't take this opportunity to make it clear, it would be difficult to leave. "I said I have no amnesia, but you don't believe me. Now that the facts are before you, don't you still think you recognized the wrong person?" June Mocking heard this and stared at Feng Qingjian without blinking. "I will not admit my mistake." Feng Wei echoed, "I believe Dad will not admit his mistake." Feng Qingjian looked at the 2 people in front of her. No wonder they were father and daughter. They spoke in the same tone. "Forget it if you don't believe it, I should go back." June Mocking stood up and said, "I'll see you off." Feng Qingjian was not a pretentious person. "Okay." June Mocking and Feng Qingjian walked out of the guest room one after another. Feng Wei looked at the backs of the 2 leaving with a little sadness. Dad is so powerful, but he couldn't restore his mother's memory. Isn't it possible that he can't? Xiao Jinyan saw what she was thinking and comforted, "Believe in your father, he will find a way." Feng Wei raised his head and looked at Xiao Jinyan. "I believe in Dad's strength and ability, but I didn't expect that we would all recover our memories, but my mother couldn't. I thought that my dad is so powerful, he can pinch and count, so why can't he count alone? Any trace of my mother?" Xiao Jinyan was also a little confused. He had witnessed it with his own eyes. Xiaoju's mother had been missing for so many years, but the Imperial Master had not found her. This meant that there must be something going on. The Imperial Master didn't know about it? It may be caused by some reason. Your father is so powerful, he will definitely be able to solve this reason. By then, your mother will also regain her memory. Feng Wu nodded, I hope so. My father finally found my mother and we can't be separated anymore. Xiao Jinyan held her in his arms and comforted her gently, we will definitely never be separated again. When Jun Wuxian came, Jun Mocking and Feng Qingjian had already left the palace. When Feng Wu saw Jun Wuxian, he called out warmly, brother. Jun Wuxian walked over with a smile on his face, I heard from Xuehui that mother has been found. I found it? Before Feng Wu finished speaking, Jun Wuxian couldn't wait to say, then I'll go take a look. After Jun Wuxian finished speaking, he walked towards the guest room, but was stopped by Feng Wu, father has allowed mother to leave the palace. Jun Wuxian was a little confused, why do you want to leave the palace? Feng Wu told Jun Wuxian what had just happened. That's the way it is, but I trust my father and I won't mistake my wife. Jun Wuxian said, I also believe in father, but now, father should want to quickly find a way to restore mother's memory. Feng Wu stared at Jun Wuxian for a long time. Knowing that he had been busy with his wedding recently, she smiled and asked, brother, the wedding is getting closer. How do you feel? Jun Wuxian thought for a while and returned from Nanzhao Kingdom. Seeing the wedding day approaching, he was looking forward to it, looking forward to Qing Qing putting on her wedding dress. Happy. In fact, Jun Wuxian didn't say anything, Feng Wu must have been happy to see his face and eyes light up when marriage was mentioned. I can tell. By the way, how is Qing Qing these days? I haven't seen her for a while. Jun Mocking went to look for Su Qing Qing yesterday, but was blocked outside the door. She said it's not good to meet before marriage, and they'll meet again on the wedding day. Feng Wu asked, is she busy? Jun Wuxian said, maybe, but I heard it's not good to meet before marriage. Although I don't care about these, I still respect their ideas. Feng Wu has also heard some things about marriage between men and women. Before marriage, the man and woman don't meet each other, and all the details are discussed by the elders of both sides. At this time, the carriage has stopped steadily at the door of the inn. Feng Qingjian glanced at Jun Mocking, I'm going down. As soon as the voice fell, Jun Mocking held her hand, raised his cold eyes and looked at her, do you want to leave? Feng Qingjian lowered her eyes and glanced at the hand holding her. His hand was very clean, with slender knuckles. When he grabbed her, he used force. As long as she didn't struggle, she wouldn't feel how much force he used. When she met those cold eyes, she was stunned for a moment, but she still told the truth. I will leave here sooner or later. Jun Mocking knew that she was not joking. It was because he knew her that he knew she would leave, and soon. He looked at her steadily, are you willing to do so? Feng Qingjian was stunned again. Such a beauty came to her door, and she really couldn't bear to leave. But she couldn't do anything about it. She couldn't steal her away, right? If Jun Mocking just needed to remarry, she could still accept it because of his appearance. But he came to find a wife, and because he recognized the wrong person, he came to her, which was completely different. Thinking of Xiaoju's craftsmanship, she would not be able to eat it after leaving, and she was really reluctant to do so. Feng Qingjian looked at Jun Mocking with eyes. She hadn't noticed it before. Staring at handsome guys was nothing big, that was someone else. Staring at Jun Mocking, the feeling was completely different, the more she looked at him, the more she couldn't look away. Thinking back, those handsome men she had seen before could no longer be called handsome men, and they were far from the one in front of her. What's there to be reluctant about? We've only met twice, at most we're just familiar with each other. June Mocking held her hand tightly and used a little force to close the distance between them. It was broad daylight, and as the distance was shortened, their breaths were intertwined. The faint fragrance of bamboo leaves surrounded the tip of the nose, which was very pleasant. Say it again. June Mocking's voice was cold and a little indifferent. Although he was over 40 years old, his voice was not deep and low, but as crisp and pleasant as rain hitting banana leaves. Feng Qingjian looked at June Mocking closely. He was really young, without any fine lines at the corners of his eyes, and his skin was as white as jade, without any flaws. She often looked in the mirror. Although she was already 38 years old, she looked very young, but if she looked carefully, she could still find traces of time. Now that the two faces were so close, they would find that June Mocking was younger than her. Looking at such a handsome face, she swallowed her saliva secretly. No one could stand being stared at by such a handsome man. After a stalemate, Feng Qingjian really couldn't stand it anymore. You let me go first." June Mocking didn't let her go, but instead closed the distance between them. Feng Qingjian had the illusion that June Mocking wanted to kiss her. The distance between them was only 2 centimeters, and they could touch each other's lips as long as they moved forward a little. Feng Qingjian felt that June Mocking was using a beauty trick, but he himself didn't know it. He kept staring at her with that look. Didn't he know how beautiful his eyes were? After a long time, June Mocking finally spoke, "I won't let go." Feng Qingjian was a little helpless. After thinking for a while, she advised, "It doesn't matter if you take the wrong road. At most, you can turn around and walk again. If you recognize the wrong house, the problem will be serious. Turning around will not solve the problem." June Mocking, "I'm not that stupid." Feng Qingjian, "Yes, you are smart," holding the woman's hand. But she didn't want to say these words to her face. It's not that she didn't dare, but that if she said it, it would give people the feeling that it was not him who was being a hooligan, but her. She glanced at the hand holding her and said, "Are you going to hold my hand all the time? You have to follow me even when I go to the toilet." June Mocking did not answer Feng Qingjian's question, but stared at that face for a long time before asking, "Why did you become stupid?" Feng Qingjian didn't react to the meaning of his words, and subconsciously asked doubts, "Ah." June Mocking said, "You used to be very smart." Feng Qingjian knew that June Mocking was not praising her, but his wife. June Mocking said again, "Now that you have become so stupid, what should you do in the future?" Feng Qingjian, "Why does she feel like she is already in her 70s or 80s? June Mocking was a little helpless. Of course he didn't want to let go, but if he didn't let go, he couldn't always follow her. It's not impossible to follow her, but he was afraid that she would be unhappy. If he let go, she would leave, and it would be difficult to find her. Feng Qingjian suddenly turned cold. "If you don't let go, don't blame me for being rude." "I won't fight with you," June Mocking said faintly, so he grabbed both of Feng Qingjian's hands. Feng Qingjian watched her two hands being grabbed by June Mocking easily. The so-called strong man is like June Mocking, calm and effortless. She said in a gangster tone, "If it weren't for the three views not allowing it, I would definitely make you regret messing with me." June Mocking rarely showed a different look. "What's the use of talking without doing?" Feng Qingjian looked at June Mocking, and had the illusion that I was waiting for you to make me regret it. "Does your daughter know that you are like this?" June Mocking raised his eyebrows slightly. "Xiaju will support me unconditionally." Feng Qingjian thought of Feng Wu, and believed in her father so much that she naturally supported him. She was worn out by the grinding. "What do you want?" "For dinner, I will ask Xiaju to make boiled fish, ants climbing trees, mountain powder balls and braised meat, stir-fried beef." June Mocking said a long list of dishes, all of which were not available here. "I will pick you up then." Feng Qingjian listened to the unfamiliar names of the dishes, but just thought of Xiaju's cooking skills. Even if she had never eaten them, she could imagine that each one was delicious. She nodded instinctively, okay. June mocking then let go of her hand and said softly, I will pick you up later. Feng Qingjian nodded, and after getting off the carriage, she looked back at the carriage behind her. The door was not closed, and she could feel the gaze from June mocking. June mocking was able to see Feng Qingjian from this angle. He saw her looking back at him, and then he saw her walking straight into the inn. He retracted his gaze, and after a long while, he took out a mirror from the space and looked at himself for a while. He wondered if he was not as handsome as he was in the past. Feng liked his face very much back then. She was indifferent now. Did she not like this face? After looking for a while, he could not see anything, so he put the mirror back into the space. Maybe his aesthetic taste changed with age? June mocking thought about it all the way, but he could not figure it out. When he returned to the East Palace and saw Xiaju, he walked over. Feng Wu had been waiting for her father to come back. Now that he was back, she could not wait to greet him. Dad, what's wrong? Doesn't mother still think she's not your wife? June mocking said, her memory has been moved. I haven't thought of a solution yet. As for her, she naturally doesn't believe it. Feng Wu guessed, could it be that someone deliberately moved mother's memory? Afraid that mother would remember the past and would not leave father. It's possible. June mocking thought for a while and asked his daughter, does your mother not like me now? Feng Wu looked up and down at her father with a puzzled look, why does dad think so? June mocking thought for a while before telling her his doubts. Your mother used to be very smart. If she said she liked someone, she would hold on to it tightly, otherwise there would be no chance. Your mother is very cold to me now. Feng Wu seemed to have heard something extraordinary, and couldn't help gossiping, Dad, according to what you said, it was mother who pursued you first back then. Good night. Seeking monthly tickets and recommendation tickets for support. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 624. June mocking found that his daughter always focused on the opposite of him. He was clearly saying that Feng was cold to him, but she was curious about who chased whom at the beginning. It's not important. What's important is that your mother doesn't like me anymore. Feng Wu comforted him in a gentle voice, Dad, you are so handsome, how could mother not like you? Mother just doesn't remember you. At the beginning, she and I didn't know each other, but she liked me. This went to the place where June mocking couldn't figure it out. When she was a stranger, she could like him. Now she doesn't remember, but she is indifferent to him. Let June mocking doubt again that he has no charm. Feng Wu thought for a while, and analyzed it from a woman's perspective. Mother has lost her memory. In her eyes, Dad is a family man. As long as her values are correct, she will endure even if she likes him. A word awakened the dreamer. June mocking felt that his daughter's words made sense. Feng thought she had recognized the wrong person. With her temperament, she would definitely not like him, a married man. If it weren't for his daughter's reminder, he would have thought that he was not proactive enough and had lost the things that Feng liked when he was young. It seems that only by letting Feng recover her memory can she be the same as before. Feng Wu tugged at her father's arm and called out, Dad. June mocking lowered his eyes and looked at his daughter, what's wrong? Feng Wu asked curiously, Dad, how did you and mother get together? June mocking said, if you are so curious, then wait for your mother to recover her memory and let her tell you. Okay. Feng Wu smiled and said, but I guess mother must have been tempted by her beauty. June mocking did not comment. At dinner, June mocking waited for Feng Qingjian at the door of the inn early, just like last night. Compared to the first time, Feng Qingjian was calmer. She was not a teenage girl who forgot what she was going to do when facing a handsome man like June mocking. June Mocking looked at Feng Qingjian, who was sitting at the door of the carriage. Why are you sitting so far away? Feng Qingjian said, we are a single man and a single woman, it's better to keep some distance. June Mocking asked, what do you think of me? A shameless person. Feng Qingjian looked at June Mocking's cold and elegant temperament, and he was not a shameless person at all. I don't mean that. There is a difference between men and women. It's better to keep a distance. Since you don't mean that, sit here. June Mocking pointed to the seat opposite Feng Qingjian. Seeing June Mocking insisting, Feng Qingjian had to move and sit opposite him. June Mocking said to dispel her concerns, if you don't want to, I won't do anything out of the ordinary to you. Feng Qingjian smiled awkwardly, I don't mean that. She was afraid that she would not be able to resist the temptation. June Mocking said again, sometimes I can't control myself. Feng Qingjian looked at June Mocking and said seriously that he couldn't control himself. There was no other expression on his handsome face, as if he was talking about something strange and ordinary. Because of this, even if June Mocking makes an intimate move like in the morning, it won't be annoying. There is no trace of worldliness in June Mocking. But his actions do show that he is very devoted to his wife and dotes on her very much. Feng Qingjian envied her more and more, but unfortunately she was not, she just looked similar. Seeing that she didn't speak, June Mocking picked up the teacup and handed it to her, drink tea. Thank you. Feng Qingjian thanked him, took the teacup and handed it to her lips and took a few sips of tea to cover up her embarrassment. June Mocking stared at Feng Qingjian without blinking, which made Feng Qingjian feel uncomfortable, but she didn't mean to move away. Feng Qingjian just felt a little hot all over. The look was obviously very cold, but she felt hot. Feng Wuya cooked a table of delicious food tonight, trying to trap her mother with delicious food and let her stay willingly. June Wuxian stayed for dinner to see his mother. When he saw June Mocking and Feng Qingjian coming in one after another, he stood up and greeted them, Father, Mother. Feng Qingjian was stunned by the sudden appearance of an older son. The man in front of her looked almost the same as June Mocking, so how could he have such an older son? She had heard June Mocking say that he had a son, and it seemed that he had also said that he would have a grandson next year. Your son is so big. June Mocking glanced at June Wuxian, yeah. Feng Qingjian jokingly said in a low voice, you didn't become a father at the age of 12. June Mocking replied, I'm not that precocious. In ancient times, it was possible to become a father at the age of 12. But he was just in the first grade of junior high school when he was 12. Feng Qingjian was a little embarrassed, that's not what I meant. June Mocking said, sit down and have dinner first. Okay. Feng Qingjian sat down at the table with June Mocking, glanced at the food on the table, and couldn't help swallowing. After June Wuxian sat down, he glanced at Feng Qingjian, and seeing their actions, he knew that he hadn't recovered his memory yet. June Mocking picked up some dishes for Feng Qingjian, then looked at June Wuxian, how are the wedding preparations going? June Wuxian said, it's almost ready, don't worry, father. June Wuxian has been very sensible since he was a child, so June Mocking doesn't have to worry about it. Well, tell me if you need anything. As a 30-year-old man, it is easy for June Wuxian to prepare for the wedding by himself, not to mention that it is a once-in-a-lifetime event, so he naturally can't be careless. Thank you, father. Feng Qingjian raised her head and glanced at the father and son. She felt that they were very different from other fathers and sons. As an elder, June Mocking actually asked the groom to prepare for his son's marriage. Susu pointed to her favorite meat and said, Grandma, this is meat. Thank you Susu. Feng Qingjian smiled and put some meat into the bowl. Because there are 2 more little ones, every meal will be more lively. Feng Qingjian also likes the atmosphere of eating here, it feels like a family having fun together. After dinner, June Mocking took her to the yard to eat. I had already visited Hehuan Hall last night when I was eating, so I was familiar with it. After walking around for a while, Feng Qingjian raised her head and looked at June Mocking. It's time for me to go back. June Mocking paused, as if he didn't expect her to be in a hurry to go back. Not staying. Feng Qingjian shook her head. She would have to leave sooner or later, so it was better to leave early. June Mocking didn't force it. I'll give it to you. Feng Qingjian nodded. Yeah. We still took the carriage when we went back. Feng Qingjian found that June Mocking was very powerful in Qinggong, but he was a bit lazy. Otherwise, why would he ride a carriage? It was many times slower than Qinggong. It was quiet inside the carriage, only the sound of the wheels could be heard. June Mocking, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly asked her, "Do you believe what I said?" Feng Qingjian asked, "Which aspect?" June Mocking said, "I said you are my wife." Feng Qingjian stopped in front of June Mocking, raised her head to look at that handsome face, and said one sentence at a time, "I know you are not lying to me, you just recognized the wrong person, and I also understand that you are separated from her. 19 years later, it is understandable that I would admit my mistake because I missed you so much. There are very few men like you in this world, and I still appreciate you." June Mocking simply ignored the previous words and felt a little happier after hearing the rest. The second half of the sentence is what I like to hear. Feng Qingjian was stunned for a moment when she heard this, and then she couldn't help laughing. "I didn't realize that such an outstanding person like you still likes to praise you." June Mocking said confidently, "This is sentiment." Feng Qingjian felt that she could bear it, otherwise she would have laughed out loud when she heard June Mocking actually say this. Complimenting him is actually a sentiment? June Mocking has lived for 42 years, and his only love was with Feng Er. Because of this, at first, one of them was straight and the other was innocent, one was not enthusiastic about feelings, and the other desperately wanted the other to like her. As for sentiment, June Mocking, as a modern person, has never practiced it, at least he has seen similar posts. If couples complain less and praise more, their relationship will heat up. You should trust your husband's vision and not mistake his wife. Just as Feng Qingjian was about to retort, June Mocking said again, "I will find a way to restore your memory." After June Mocking has practiced to a certain level, apart from the fact that his appearance does not age easily, he has not encountered anything that he cannot solve in so many years. Of course, except for the matter of my daughter traveling through time. So for June Mocking, who was already at the top, it was like finding something to do. Feng Qingjian shrugged helplessly. June Mocking was so determined that she couldn't say anything. When they returned to the inn, June Mocking followed behind. Feng Qingjian thought that he wanted to guard her again, and with his martial arts, she couldn't interfere. When closing the door, she reminded, "It's quite cold today. It's better for you to go up with the quilt in your arms." June Mocking ignored her words and said, "You don't want me to come in and sit down?" "Well." Feng Qingjian hesitated for a while, then let him in. After getting along with him several times, she still had a certain understanding of June Mocking's character. After June Mocking came in, he went straight to the table and sat down. Feng Qingjian then also sat down, raised the teapot and asked him, "Would you like to drink tea?" June Mocking glanced at the teapot in her hand and knew it was cold without asking. "I don't drink herbal tea." Feng Qingjian. Quite picky. Feng Qingjian asked Qingrong to bring a pot of hot tea. After drinking tea for a while, Feng Qingjian glanced at June Mocking opposite, showing no intention of leaving yet. "Aren't you going back tonight?" June Mocking put down the teacup in his hand and raised his eyes to look at Feng Qingjian. "I don't mind staying." After 19 years of separation, he had never gotten along well with her. "It's okay for you to guard the roof," Feng Qingjian actually wanted to say, "It wasn't necessary." June Mocking said, "You can just stay in the house." Feng Qingjian, You pretend I didn't say anything. June Mocking stood up, and when Feng Qingjian saw this, she also stood up, thinking that he was leaving and planned to see him off. As a result, June Mocking came over, held her hand, and hugged her in one go, without any hesitation. Feng Qingjian struggled for a while. It was really not that she couldn't resist the beauty, but that she couldn't struggle away. June Mocking was very strong, controlling her like an invisible force. What are you doing? I just want to hug you. June Mocking felt that she should do something. She couldn't be too passive or go out of her way for fear of scaring her. He hugged because he wanted to, and Feng taught him. Feng Qingjian was stunned for a long time, feeling that she was fascinated by the beauty again. June Mocking was a married woman, so it was inappropriate to hug her. Just when Feng Qingjian wanted to get away, June Mocking said, I remember there is a scar on your lower back. Take off your clothes and show me. Feng Qingjian. June Mocking was a little anxious and wanted to do it by herself. When she went to untie Feng Qingjian's girdle, she was stopped. If you do it again, it will constitute indecent assault. June Mocking realized that he was out of line, so he took his hand back. Then you do it yourself. Feng Qingjian did not untie the waist belt, because she knew better than anyone whether she had scars or not. I do have a scar on my lower back. June Mocking said again, it's round. Feng Qingjian nodded, yeah. June Mocking looked at Feng Qingjian's lower back, eager to see it with his own eyes. Let me see. Wait a minute. Feng Qingjian was afraid that he would do it himself again, so she greeted him in advance. June Mocking stood still after hearing this. Feng Qingjian came behind the screen, untied the waist belt neatly, and took off her coat. She was a gangster. Unlike the daughter of a wealthy family, she was not particular about details. It was not impossible to take a look at the scar. So Feng Qingjian lifted her clothes, revealing only a little bit of her lower back, just enough to see the scar. She shouted to the screen, you can come in and take a look. Before she finished speaking, she saw a blue-white figure walking in. It was more like a flash than a walk-in, and it was very fast. It was the first time she had seen someone so fast. June Mocking lowered his eyes to look at the exposed waist, where only the scar was exposed. His slender fingers reached over and touched the dark scar. So many years have passed, and the scar has not faded. The place touched was a little cold and itchy, and there was also some strange feeling. Feng Qingjian subconsciously wanted to avoid it, and she let go of the hem of her clothes. June Mocking looked at her steadily. You never told me your identity. Is my identity important? Feng Qingjian put on her coat and tied her belt. I think your amnesia is related to your identity. Feng Qingjian paused. June Mocking said again, I can tell fortunes, but I can't tell yours. Your previous birth date was fake. Fake birth date was the only possibility June Mocking could think of. Feng Qingjian was confused. I don't understand what you are talking about. June Mocking thought she didn't remember, so he didn't continue asking, but asked another question, when will you go back? Why are you asking this? I'll go back with you. Feng Qingjian was stunned. I just want to find out why you disappeared and why you lost your memory. June Mocking paused here, stared at her face and said, I can actually read palms. Feng Qingjian couldn't keep up with June Mocking's rhythm. She said she would go back with him, and then she talked about reading palms. June Mocking took her hand and looked at her palm with his eyes down. Although palm reading can't tell anything else, it can tell the marriage line. You are married and have a daughter. You will only have one husband in your life and you can grow old together. The fate line, there will be a disaster when you are 16 years old. If you survive the disaster, you will have good fortune in the future. June Mocking said and looked at Feng Qingjian, when you were 16 years old, you met me. Good night, hot babies. By the way, please support me with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Iyun Si. Chapter 625. Feng Qingjian looked at June mocking and said every word, which didn't sound like a lie, because with his face, no matter what he said, no one would think he was lying. However, she discovered an important problem. June Mocking's wife only gave birth to one daughter. Don't you have a son? Are the son and daughter the same father? June Mocking, Wuxian was the one who picked it up. June Mocking was only 6 years old when she picked up June Wuxian. At that time, he was as thin as a monkey, which was caused by malnutrition. He had just worn it not long ago. He was originally intended to be a younger brother, but in ancient times, men got married early, and almost all of them as old as him got married and had children. So he simply raised June Wuxian as his son, and he named him after him. Fortunately, my son is sensible and easy to feed. These are all discovered after having Xiaju. Children are actually difficult to raise. They require care, patience, and energy to raise. Being a baby daddy for the first time, June Mocking was more serious than practicing. Picked it up, Feng Qingjian thought of June Wuxian. No wonder he had such an old son. She thought June Mocking was mature too early. Every time June Mocking was in front of her, he only mentioned Xiaju, because Xiaju was her biological child. Then does June Wuxian know? Feng Qingjian actually wanted to say that you are partial and are obviously not as good to your son as your daughter. I know, but that child Wuxian has always regarded my biological father and Xiaju as his biological sister. He became sensible early, and I have never been a father, so naturally he doesn't spend as much energy as Xiaju. As for partiality, of course there is a bit of it. I picked up June Wuxian at the age of 18, a college student in modern times, when he was busy with his studies. Suddenly raising a 6-year-old son, I can only say that he is training with June Wuxian. Feng Qingjian thought about it and felt that how could a man who had never been a father know how to be a father? Probably just to keep June Wuxian well fed and clothed, so that he would feel well fed and well fed. She looked down at the palm of her hand, and she couldn't understand the lines on it. Is palmistry really that accurate? June Mocking said, 8 or 9 are inseparable from 10. Oh, Feng Qingjian looked down at her palms again, thinking of the scar on her lower back. Could June Mocking really be her husband? Then why doesn't she remember? Seeing her staring at the palm of his hand, June Mocking probably believed what he said. Can you stay tonight? Feng Qingjian retracted her hand, raised her head to look at June Mocking, and refused directly, no. June Mocking didn't force it, then you should rest early. Feng Qingjian nodded. June Mocking just walked out. Feng Qingjian followed to the door, looked at June Mocking's tall figure and asked, are you really going to stay on the roof? June Mocking paused when he heard this, then looked back at Feng Qingjian and nodded, yeah. It's too cold, you should go back. Feng Qingjian asked him to go back in order to prevent him from saying he would stay. June Mocking's voice sounded helpless, in the past, you would have kept me. Feng Qingjian. June Mocking was still guarding the roof. If he wasn't afraid of her suddenly leaving, he wouldn't have to guard him. Feng Qingjian was lying on the bed, thinking that June Mocking might be guarding the roof again, so she couldn't sleep. After thinking about it, she got up and put on her clothes, secretly jumped out of the window, lay down under the eaves, and peeked at June Mocking like last time. I found him just like last time, seemingly sitting there leisurely and drinking tea indifferently. Those who didn't know it thought he was sitting on his bed, so leisurely and contented. Feng Qingjian was about to go back, but as soon as she looked away, she saw June Mocking appearing in front of her. There was no trace of surprise in his cold eyes, as if he knew she was here. She said, nonsense, you haven't slept either. June mocking nodded, come with me to enjoy the moon. Before Feng Qingjian could say her words of rejection, June mocking grabbed her waist and carried her up. Feng Qingjian is not heavy and is effortless to hold. Sitting on the roof, the cold wind was biting, and Feng Qingjian was shivering in the cold. Feng Qingjian just came out to take a look, so she put on a coat, but she didn't know that she would not be able to go back. June mocking noticed that her body was shaking violently, and he just let go of her waist and hugged her again, come closer. Feng Qingjian raised her head and looked at June mocking. She wanted to know if he was sick. He stayed up so late and stayed on the roof. He even pulled her up to blow the cold wind. Whose fault was it for the cold? But the next second, she noticed a stream of heat coming from her big hand. The steady stream of heat gradually warmed her shivering body. She looked at June mocking again in surprise, is this internal power? June mocking nodded, yeah. Feng Qingjian asked again, you are not afraid of the cold, is it because of your deep internal strength? June mocking nodded again. Feng Qingjian's beautiful eyes gradually revealed a look of admiration, I heard that it would take 100 years to develop such deep inner strength. You are only in your 40s, you are so powerful. It's not that exaggerated as a modern cultivator, June mocking is naturally different from the ancient martial arts practitioners. The reason why his appearance does not age easily is also due to his cultivation. Feng Qingjian said, you are so humble. Yeah. Certainly. June mocking stared at Feng Qingjian for a long time, feeling that he was getting closer to her. After being separated for so many years, now that they are reunited, he always wants to get closer to her. I don't know if it's because she took the initiative back then. Feng Qingjian found that June mocking had been staring at her. After a long time, she felt a little uncomfortable and confused, is there something on my face? June mocking said, no, it's clean. Feng Qingjian was even more confused, then why do you keep staring at me? June mocking stretched out his slender fingers and pinched her face, and finally landed on her lips, I want to kiss you. Feng Qingjian blushed. June mocking was probably the only one who could say that he wanted to kiss her so seriously. Seeing that she didn't say anything, June mocking asked, don't you want to? Feng Qingjian swallowed her saliva secretly, I don't know if she is your wife yet, is it polite to ask this question? June mocking asked back, does this have anything to do with politeness? Feng Qingjian raised her eyebrows, why not? If you kiss directly, it would be indecent. June mocking nodded when he heard it, then you always indecently molested me in the past, what should be counted? Feng Qingjian was about to refute when she indecently molested him, and suddenly realized that he was talking about his wife. She was a little curious, your wife was so fierce back then. June mocking suddenly heard the word fierce, which didn't fit Feng at all. She was obviously delicate, sassy, bright and lively. Not fierce, but courageous. I like her very much. Feng Qingjian was very curious. How did June mocking manage to say the 4 words I like her very much with a paralyzed face? She couldn't help gossiping, how much do you like her? June mocking paused after hearing this, as if thinking about this question seriously. How much do you like her? He couldn't say it either. He had met many active women, but he only liked Feng. I only like you. The sudden confession made Feng Qingjian blush a little more. If she hadn't reacted quickly, she would have almost thought that June mocking was confessing to her. Looking at June mocking's serious look, she actually felt that he was a little cute. If someone else said these words, it would feel a little greasy. The word greasy will never appear on June mocking. To ease the embarrassment, she looked up at the moon above her head, I can see that your wife is unique in your eyes. June mocking nodded in agreement, very self-aware. Feng Qingjian. Asterisk. Feng Wu slept until she woke up naturally, and after breakfast, she went to Xiun Pavilion. When she went there, she happened to see Xiao Jinyu. Xiao Jinyu smiled and greeted, "Sister-in-law, why are you here?" Feng Guiu said, "I came to see the chickens and ducks, and picked a chicken and caught 2 fish to take back for lunch. What about you?" Xiao Jinyu said, "Ayan is not in good health, I'll catch an old hen and stew it for her." Feng Guiu nodded, "I saw her before, wasn't she fine? Why is she not in good health? Is she sick?" "I don't know, the imperial doctor has seen it, but he said that she is weak and needs to be supplemented." Xiao Jinyu and Feng Guiu walked into Xiun Pavilion while talking. Xiao Gaiza came forward and saluted, "Master, Prince Yu." Xiao Jinyu said, "Xiao Gaiza, pick a fat old hen for me." Xiao Gaiza glanced at her master and wanted to say that Prince Yu came to catch old hens every now and then, and the old hens were almost eaten up. "Go and take a look." Feng Guiu didn't notice the look in Xiao Gaiza's eyes. She didn't pick old hens today, but young roosters that had just grown up. They were tender and delicious when braised. The 3 of them came to the chicken coop, and Xiao Gaizi opened the door and went in to catch old hens. Feng Guiu stood aside and looked at the chicken coop. The chicks had grown up and could be eaten. But soon, she found that there were fewer old hens in the chicken coop. "Why are there only a few old hens left?" Xiao Gaiza looked at Xiao Jinyu after hearing this. Xiao Jinyu also realized that he had been coming to Xiun Pavilion a little more frequently recently, and turned his head to look at Feng Guiu. Feng Guiu also looked at Xiao Jinyu, and it was not difficult to guess that he had caught the old hen. Xiao Jinyu said a little embarrassedly, "Ayan is not in good health, so I caught a few more old hens to nourish her." As a doctor, Feng Guiu had to remind Xiao Jinyu, "If you are not in good health, it is useless to always eat old hens." Xiao Jinyu thought that eating more old hens would make her better, and she couldn't help but feel anxious when she heard Feng Guiu say that. "What should I do? Ayan has been in a bad mood recently." Seeing Xiao Jinyu so anxious, Feng Guiu comforted her, "I will take a look at her later." Xiao Jinyu nodded happily, "Thank you, sister-in-law." Feng Guiu asked Xiao Gaiza to pick a little rooster and 2 fish and send them to the Hehuan Hall, and then went to the Qiancheng Hall. When she went there, Xiao Jinyu was waiting at the gate of the palace. When he saw her coming, he took her in. "Sister-in-law, will Ayan be okay?" Feng Guiu hadn't seen concubine Han yet, so it was hard to make a conclusion. "Let me see first." "Okay." Xiao Jinyu took Feng Guiu into concubine Han's courtyard and was seen by concubine Wan. Xiao Jinyu had been back for so long, but he had never been to her courtyard. Instead, he went to concubine Han's place every day, as if she didn't exist. At the beginning, she thought of marrying Xiao Jinyu because he was a good person. The result now seemed to tell her that her original choice was wrong. But would the result be different if she married Xiao Jinyan? When Feng Guiu entered, she saw concubine Han sitting on the couch, drinking tea with a teacup in her hand. When she saw her coming, she just called out, "Crown Princess." She didn't salute. Feng Guiu didn't care. Xiao Jinyu said, "You are in low spirits and weak all day, I will ask my sister-in-law to come and check on you." Concubine Han nodded and looked up at Feng Guiu, "Sorry to bother you, Crown Princess." Feng Guiu sat down on the couch and looked at concubine Han. Before she could speak, Xiao Jinyu, who was standing beside her, took concubine Han's hand and pulled up her sleeves and put them in front of Feng Guiu. Feng Guiu felt that Xiao Jinyu was more fond of his wife than his brother. Look, he even did something as simple as pulling up his sleeves himself. She began to take concubine Han's pull seriously. She frowned and looked up at concubine Han, and found that her face was a little pale, and she was thinner than before, and her eyes were dull. Xiao Jinyu asked worriedly, "Sister-in-law, how is Ayan?" Feng Guiu said, "Concubine Han is indeed very weak and has severe anemia." Xiao Jinyu asked doubtfully, "Anemia? What is anemia?" Anemia is a modern term. In ancient times, anemia was called blood deficiency. Feng Wu explained, "It's just blood deficiency, need more blood." Xiao Jinyu asked, "How to replenish it?" Feng Wu said, "As for blood supplement, food supplement is the best, but concubine Han is severely blood deficient. First rely on medicine to supplement, and then try to choose blood replenishing ingredients every day. I'll make a list for you, you can prepare it according to the list." Xiao Jinyu was lucky that he met Feng Wu today, otherwise he didn't know when his wife's illness would be cured. "Sister-in-law, I'll write it down." Feng Wu took a pen and paper and wrote a full piece of paper, and then wrote a prescription. Xiao Jinyu asked someone to get the medicine, and then took the list, intending to copy a few points and let the kitchen servants write it down. Feng Wu stared at concubine Han for a long time and reminded her, "However, I can't see the reason why concubine Han is anemic. If you feel uncomfortable, remember to tell me." Xiao Jinyu listened very carefully, and then nodded seriously, "I know, sister-in-law." After Feng Wu finished her instructions, she returned to the Hehuan palace and found that her father had returned. She happily stepped forward and asked, "Dad, didn't mother come with you?" June mocking said, "She said to keep a distance." Feng Wu asked in confusion, "Why keep a distance?" June mocking thought for a while and said, "Maybe it's because the distance was too close last night." Feng Wu smiled when he heard this, "Dad, the amount of information is a bit too much. Last night, Dad and Mother didn't stay together all night, right?" June mocking nodded, "Yes, they stayed together all night. Last night, he watched the moon with Feng until midnight, and then Feng fell asleep. He asked Shui to get a fox fur coat to cover her, and then slept in her arms all night." Feng Wu thought about the fact that his father and mother slept together last night, and felt a little happy. It seems that mother is almost accepting father. June mocking asked, "How do you know? If mother didn't accept father, how could a woman stay with a man all night?" "Mother is not such a casual person," Feng Wu said confidently. Good night. Please support with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The Prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 626. When she and Xiao Jinyan were together, it was because she accepted it that she was willing to sleep with him. If she really doesn't want to, as a doctor, she still has ways to avoid going to bed. My mother must have accepted her father before letting him stay overnight. June mocking felt that what his daughter said made sense. He knew quite well what kind of person Feng was. Otherwise, Feng wouldn't have slept in his arms last night. After she finishes her work, I will leave with her for a while. Feng Qingjian held her father's arm and was a little reluctant when she heard that he was leaving. "Why are you leaving? How long will you be leaving?" Investigating the cause of her amnesia, it is still unknown how long she will be away. Try to come back as soon as possible. June mocking touched her daughter's head soothingly. Feng Wu is no longer 3 years old. He knows that his father wants to restore his mother's memory as soon as possible and leaves for a better reunion. Then I'll wait here for Dad and Mom to come back. June mocking lowered his eyes and looked at his daughter's face, which looked similar to Feng's. Her daughter really looked like her. Xiao Jinyan was so busy these days that sometimes he couldn't even make it back for lunch to eat with Xiaju. Lu Zaiyan walked in quickly and saw Xiao Jinyan in front of the desk. He stepped forward and said, "Your Highness." Xiao Jinyan raised his eyes and glanced at Lu Zaiyan. "Why are Master Lu here?" Lu Zaiyan smiled. "Wei Chen heard that the Imperial Master is here, and Wei Chen wants to meet him." Xiao Jinyan raised his head after hearing this, with a flash of curiosity in his eyes. "When did you become interested in the Imperial Master?" Lu Zaiyan said, "Wei Chen just wants to confirm one thing. Besides, who is not interested in the reputation of the Imperial Master?" Xiao Jinyan snorted lightly, but it was true. Who wouldn't want to see my father-in-law? Even my father wanted to see my father-in-law from time to time. After I finish my work, Mr. Lu can go to the East Palace with me. Lu Zhayan saluted happily after hearing this. Thank you, Your Highness, for this. Xiao Jinyan seemed to have thought of something, and suddenly raised his head and asked him, Master Lu, have you been very relaxed recently? Lu Zhayan replied subconsciously, it's not bad. Since you're not busy, help me sort out the cursive writing. Xiao Jinyan then pointed to the bookshelf in the corner and said, by the way, these all need to be proofread, and you did them too. Lu Zhayan looked at the cursive script, and then looked at the bookshelf in the corner. There were 3 rows. Did he come at the wrong time today? He looked at Xiao Jinyan with some embarrassment. Your Highness, this. Xiao Jinyan said, I believe in Mr. Lu's ability that it can be completed within 3 days. Lu Zhayan was petrified on the spot. Xiao Jinyan was working overtime and couldn't bear to see others idle. His Highness the Crown Prince just spoke, so how could he have any reason to refuse? Xiao Jinyan was very busy during this period and went back very late at night. When he went back, Xiaoju had already fallen asleep. He wanted to get close to Xiaoju, but he was also very tired. In addition to sleeping with Xiaoju in his arms, he could only sleep with Xiaoju in his arms. Someone will come to share the burden, and he will naturally not be polite. Lu Zhayan is a bachelor who studies fortune-telling every day. He might really become a nerd. Lu Zhayan looked at the cursive script and glanced at the door. He didn't see Qin Xiao when he came. Your Highness, I heard that Qin Xiao will get married next month. Is it true? Xiao Jinyan nodded. Yes, I am marrying the Crown Prince's personal maid. Qin Xiao is very lucky. To marry such a virtuous wife, and to have a fat boy again, Wei Qi is not so lucky. Xiao Jinyan asked, why is Wei Qi so unlucky? Lu Zhayan glanced outside and whispered, Your Highness doesn't know something. 2 years ago, Wei Chen arranged a marriage for Wei Qi. What do you think, Your Highness? Xiao Jinyan thought for a moment and said, is Wei Qi destined to be alone? That's not enough. Lu Zhayan hesitated for a while and said, the person with Wei Qi may not be a woman. Xiao Jinyan understood immediately after hearing this. Wei Qi and Qin Xiao knew each other very well after following him for so many years. He never thought that Wei Qi might have a broken sleeve. Does Wei Qi know? Lu Zhayan said, how can Weikan say it so bluntly? Weikan just said that he will have no heirs in the future, which is considered a hint. Wei Qi had just come back from doing business. When he walked to the door, he heard the conversation between Xiao Jinyan and Lu Zhayan. As a martial arts student, he could hear it very clearly. He paused in his steps and looked a little unhappy. Lu Zhayan sighed, Weikan and Wei Qi have known each other for many years, but I really didn't notice it. Your Highness, please don't tell Wei Qi, otherwise Weikan will become an insider without informing him, and I'm afraid he won't even be friends anymore. Xiao Jinyan glanced at the door and then at Lu Zhayan. Of course I won't tell him this, but you still have to be careful. After all, paper can't contain the fire. Lu Zhayan said, Weikan understands that Weikan will never say a word in front of Wei Qi. Xiao Jinyan smiled and said nothing. After handling official business, when Xiao Jinyan and Lu Zhayan walked out one after another, Wei Qi had already left. When they arrived at the East Palace, it was not yet time for lunch. Jun Mocking was teaching Dao Tao to practice martial arts. It was said to be martial arts, but in fact it was just practicing some basic skills, the most common of which was squatting and practicing the stance. The road to learning martial arts is long, and practicing basic skills is the most important. Susu sometimes imitated Dao Tao's movements and learned how to squat on a horse, but she was not as perseverant as Dao Tao, so she couldn't learn for a while and then went to play with the tiger lion beast Dabai. When Xiao Jinyan came, Jun Mocking was sitting at the table drinking tea. He stepped forward to greet him and said, Dad. He called Xiaoju Daddy, which made him feel more intimate. Lu Zhan felt very familiar just by seeing the back of the national teacher. When he followed Xiao Jinyan closer, he found that it was indeed the person he thought of, and he couldn't help but feel a little excited. He strode forward and knelt on the ground with a thump. "Master." Xiao Jinyan saw Lu Zhan kneeling down without saying anything, and when he heard the word master, he suddenly seemed to understand. Jun Mocking raised his head lightly and saw Lu Zhan. "Get up." "Thank you, Master." Lu Zhan stood up from the ground and looked at Jun Mocking excitedly. "If I had known that Master came to Daxia, I should have come to pay my respects to Master earlier." Jun Mocking asked, "How is your study going?" It was also an accident that Jun Mocking accepted Lu Zhan as his apprentice. Lu Zhan could observe the stars at night to see the fortune, which was very powerful even in modern times. He found that Lu Zhan was also a little talented in fortune-telling and palm reading. He happened to have no apprentices, so he accepted him as his apprentice. Lu Zhan said modestly, "Thanks to Master's concern, I am working hard on this aspect and have made some breakthroughs." Jun Mocking nodded lightly, "Yeah." Lu Zhan didn't expect that the dignified Suanman master was the national master. He had been studying behind closed doors these days and missed a lot of time with his master. Lu Zhan chatted with his master for a while and then left, because he knew that his master liked quietness and didn't like to be disturbed by others. After leaving the Hehuan Palace, Xiao Jinyan said, "I didn't expect that Master Lu's master is my father. Why haven't you mentioned it before?" Lu Zhan said, "Your Highness, Master is the Suanman master, how can you mention Master's name casually?" Xiao Jinyan nodded, "That's right. No wonder Lu Zhan takes a long time to leave every time." After leaving the East Palace, Lu Zhan returned to his residence. As soon as he walked into the yard, he saw Wei Qi standing at the door. Lu Zhan met his master today and was in a very good mood, with a smile on his face. "Guardian Wei, how did you have time to come here?" Wei Qi had a dark face and pressed Lu Zhan's shoulder, as if he was going to beat him up. Lu Zhan vaguely found that Wei Qi was a little bit wrong, but he was in such a good mood that he ignored it. "I'm in a good mood today, Guardian Wei, do you want to have a drink together?" Wei Qi thought that Lu Zhan had lied to him for so long, and he was so angry that his teeth itched, and said with a dark face, "Okay, let's have a drink." Lu Zhan asked people to prepare wine and food, and heated a pot of wine. The two sat at the dining table. Lu Zhan was happy, picked up the wine pot and poured a glass of wine for Wei Qi, and then poured a glass for himself. Wei Qi looked at Lu Zhan, who was full of spring breeze, with a cold face. "Lord Lu is so happy today." "I am really happy today." Lu Zhan picked up the wine glass and clinked it with Wei Qi, then handed it to his mouth and drank it all in one gulp. Wei Qi was not happy. Anyone would be unhappy if they were deceived for so long. They had known each other for so long, but they couldn't even tell the truth. In the past 2 years, he had always thought that there was something wrong with him, so he never dared to have that idea. Qin Xiao was going to get married at the beginning of next year. As a brother who had been through thick and thin together, he was really happy for him. Seeing that Wei Qi was holding the wine glass but not drinking it, Lu Zhan reminded him, "Drink it." Wei Qi lowered his head to look at the wine in the glass, raised his head and drank it all in one breath. Lu Zhan then picked up the wine pot and filled it for him. "Qin Xiao is going to get married at the beginning of next month, and you have to find one quickly." Lu Zhan actually wanted Wei Qi to try. His calculations were not 100% accurate. What if there was still room for maneuver? Wei Kai's face darkened a little after hearing this. He felt that Lu Zhan said this on purpose. He knew the reason why he had no offspring, but he still mocked him. Is this what a brother does? "I won't drink any more." Wei Qi put down the wine glass in his hand with a pop, stood up and walked out. Lu Zhan was stunned for a moment. It was not that he had never seen Wei Qi get angry before, but he had never seen Wei Qi get angry for no reason. He hurriedly put down the wine glass in his hand and chased after him, grabbing Wei Kai's arm. "Guardian Wei, what's wrong?" Wei Qi snorted, "You still have the nerve to ask me? Are you so happy?" Lu Zhayan was confused, "What's wrong with me? Why can't I be happy? It didn't happen to you, of course you can be happy." Wei Qi shook off Lu Zhayan's hand and strode away. Lu Zhayan looked at Wei Kai's back and couldn't figure out what he meant. He didn't seem to have offended him, right? Asterisk. Feng Qingjian's affairs were almost done. In addition to following June Mocking to the East Palace to eat and drink, she was also a little worried. She had no plans to go back at the moment, but June Mocking had always wanted to follow her back to investigate the truth of the matter. These days, June Mocking has been guarding on the roof, fearing that she would run away. June Mocking said, "You never told me your identity." This was the second time June Mocking mentioned her identity. She did not answer but asked, "Is my identity important?" June Mocking said, "Your identity may be related to your memory, which is very important to me." Feng Qingjian thought for a while and found that June Mocking was looking at her, as if he was looking forward to the answer. "My identity cannot be casually disclosed." June Mocking asked again, "Even I can't tell?" "The first condition of my identity is that I cannot get married and have children, do you know?" "Look, the toad's blood is still there." Feng Qingjian rolled up her sleeves, revealing a white and slender arm, where there was a red cinnabar mole for June Mocking to see. June Mocking lowered his eyes and looked at the toad's blood on her arm, which was particularly eye-catching on her white arm. "It's fake." He stretched out his finger and pressed it, as if he was curious whether he could rub off the toad's blood. Feng Qingjian explained, "How can Xiaogongsha be fake? I applied Xiaogongsha when I was 10 years old. If I really get married with you and have a child, Xiaogongsha will disappear." June Mocking looked at Xiaogongsha and found that it was not touched. He pondered for a moment and said, "Maybe if we consummate the marriage again, it will disappear." "Feng Qingjian, can you not be so serious?" June Mocking said, "I am serious." Feng Qingjian. June Mocking continued, "Xiaogongsha, you lost it 20 years ago, you can make up for it the day after tomorrow." Feng Qingjian asked, "How to make up for it the day after tomorrow?" June Mocking explained, "You won't understand even if I tell you. You just need to understand that even if you are married, Xiaogongsha can still be applied. Xiaogongsha is actually feeding geckos with cinnabar and then crushing it and applying it on women's arms. Modern science has confirmed that female geckos are full of estrogen during the breeding period, and their skin will have spots. When they meet androgens, the estrogen and androgens will neutralize and disappear, and the spots on their bodies will also disappear. Therefore, even married women can also add the toad sand, which will automatically disappear after sex." Feng Qingjian expressed doubts, "I don't understand." June Mocking said indifferently, "It doesn't matter if you don't understand. Just remember that your toad sand was removed by me." Feng Qingjian. "But, this toad sand," June Mocking said before she finished, "only I can make it disappear." Only June Mocking could speak in a domineering tone. Feng Qingjian looked down at the toad sand on her arm, still a little bit unbelievable. This was added later, so didn't she deceive the entire tribe? June Mocking saw through her thoughts at a glance, "Don't you believe it?" Feng Qingjian told the truth, "What you said is indeed hard to believe. The best way to convince someone is to put evidence in front of her. Then I'll prove it to you." "How can this be proved?" Feng Qingjian seemed to think of something, and suddenly widened her eyes, "No, absolutely not." June Mocking took her hand and went straight into the carriage. Feng Qingjian said coldly, "June Mocking, before I am sure you are my husband, you can't do anything out of line." June Mocking didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and flicked her forehead, "Your mind is full of yellow garbage?" Feng Qingjian asked doubtfully, "What do you mean?" June Mocking, "The affairs of men and women, the joy of fish and water." Feng Qingjian was stunned, and when she reacted, she blushed. After entering the East Palace, Jun Mocking took Feng Qingjian to the Hehuan Palace. Feng Wu saw his father and mother coming, and happily greeted them. "Dad, Mother, you came so early today. Good night." Seeking monthly tickets and recommendation tickets for support. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 627. Feng Qingjian was used to Feng Wu calling her mother every time. After correcting her several times, Feng Wu was unwilling to change the title and let her go. Jun Mocking never minced words in front of her daughter. "Xiaju, Dad needs your help with something." Feng Wu asked in confusion, "What's going on?" Jun Mocking briefly explained the matter of guarding the palace sand. "You can help me prove to my father that Xiao Gongsha is already a partner and can be repaired." When Feng Wu first came back, she knew that the palace guards, especially the women in the palace, would burn the palace guards to prove their innocence. She looked at Feng Qingjian, but she didn't expect that there was gong sand on her mother's arm. "The thought of using her for experiments still makes me a little embarrassed. But in order to help my father prove it, it's not impossible." "No problem." After listening to Jun Mocking's words, Feng Qingjian guessed that the proof he was talking about was that he wanted to put palace guard sand on Xiaju's arm, and then let Xiaju have sex with the prince. Such a direct and straightforward method. When Xiao Jinyan came back, Feng Wu told him about the incident. Not to mention the easy things, and since it was his father's request, Xiao Jinyan would naturally not refuse. Xiao Jinyan ordered, "Lu 11, go get the palace guard sand." Here Lu 11 got the palace guard sand not long after he exited. "Your Highness, I brought it." Xiao Jinyu ordered, "Give it to me." Here Lu 11 raised the palace guard sand with both hands. Xiao Jinyan was holding some tools for guarding the palace, while Feng Wu had already rolled up her sleeves, revealing an arm as white as jade. He gently placed the gong sand on her arm. Feng Wu looked at the red gong sand on her arm with some curiosity. The dark red gong sand looked particularly eye-catching on her fair skin. She didn't draft into the palace, so she didn't order the palace sand. Most women in ancient times relied on gongshu sand to prove their innocence. After ordering the palace sand, Feng Wu ran out of the back room and went all the way to the side hall. When he saw Feng Qingjian, he showed her the palace sand on her arm. "Mother, look." Feng Qingjian was stunned for a moment when she saw the gong sand on Xiaju's arm. It was about the same color and size as the gong sand on her arm. "It can really be made up for later." Feng Wu said, "This is normal." In ancient times, palace guard sand was used to prove a woman's innocence. Although it was useful, it also had loopholes. Feng Qingjian raised her head and looked at Jun Mocking. No wonder he was so precise in what he said. Thinking about it, he would not be so absolute about something that he was not completely sure of. Jun Mocking could see the meaning in Feng Qingjian's eyes at a glance. "I won't lie to you." Feng Qingjian pursed her lips and did not answer. In the evening, Feng Qingjian stayed in the East Palace. After Lu Zayan helped him share some official duties, he felt a little more relaxed and returned to Hehuan Hall early. Feng Wu was already lying on the bed. As soon as he picked up the recipe, he saw Xiao Jinyan coming back. "Your Highness came back very early today." "I'm going to take a bath." Xiao Jinyan took off his fox fur and went to take a bath. After taking a bath, Xiao Jinyan went straight to the bed in her middle coat, lifted the quilt and got into bed. In ancient times, lying in bed and reading was very hard on the eyes, because the light from the horn lamps was too dim, so Feng Wu looked at it for a while and then put the recipe aside. After Xiao Jinyan lay down, he picked up Xiaoju's arm and glanced at the Xiao Gongsha on it. As long as he had sex tonight, the Xiao Gongsha would disappear, reminding him of the first time he consummated his marriage with Xiaoju. It was his first time, so he was inevitably a little nervous. I was also afraid that I would hurt her, so I was nervous and cautious. Even if he thinks about it now, he will still be excited and throbbing, and he will never forget it for the rest of his life. When Feng Guiu saw Xiao Jinyan staring at Xiao Gongxia, she raised her head and looked at him in confusion. What's wrong? Thinking of the time we consummated our marriage, Xiao Jinyan grabbed her wrist and pressed it above her head, and he turned over and pressed her over. Feng Guiu and Xiao Jinyan are now an old couple, and they won't blush every time they have close contact or an ambiguous atmosphere like they did back then. It's been so long, do you still remember? Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and stared at her unblinkingly. Over the past few years, she seemed to have changed little, except that she became more feminine. No matter how long it takes, I will always remember that it was the first time I wanted to have someone. When he first realized his feelings for Xiaju, he had the idea of owning her. Maybe it was because he was in the royal family, maybe it was because of his experience and sensitive mind. If it was too late, Xiaoju might not belong to him. The more I think about it, the stronger my desire to have her becomes. Later, he felt more than once how correct his original idea was. Immediately, Xiao Jinyan added, later, when I recovered my memory, I found that I had this kind of thought for you as early as when I was in Nanzhao Kingdom. Feng Guiu wanted to pinch his face, but found that his two hands were held by him and pressed against her head. She said coquettishly, you matured too early. Xiao Jinyan didn't think there was anything wrong with his idea at all, but it was a pity that he didn't have the ability at the time. It's very common to get a wife at the age of 16, why can't I miss you? Feng Guiu had no words to retort. In ancient times, marrying a wife at the age of 16 was indeed common. It was also normal for a girl of 13 or 14 to have a wife with him. You are so kind to me because you have such thoughts in your heart. Xiao Jinyan said, that's not entirely true. That's because you are too kind. I had no friends when I was in Nanzhao Kingdom. You are the only person who treats me well. Feng Guiu recalled that when she was a child, she was only 5 years old when she first met Xiao Jinyan. She saw the princes bullying him and saved him. Her father was the national teacher, and was named a princess by the emperor, with the title of Juyue, which was more noble than the princes and princesses in the palace. So, they dared not disobey her when she spoke. At that time, Xiao Jinyan was only 10 years old, thin, and with a bad complexion. At that time, she did not understand the meaning of a hostage, and thought that he was alone without a father or a mother. Although she did not have a mother, she had a father. When others showed off their mothers, she could show off her father. But Xiao Jinyan had none, so she had the idea of comforting him. We are childhood sweethearts. Xiao Jinyan did not comment. Let's relive it again. Feng Guiu wanted to say that they were already an old couple, and they were still reliving it, but Xiao Jinyan did not give her a chance to speak. How harmonious their relationship was, you can see from the excitement and passion of the two of them in bed now. In the guest room, Feng Qingjian lowered her head and rolled up her sleeves, looking at the toad's blood on her arm for a long time. Was it really added later? Who added it? Could it be the mother-in-law? Just when Feng Qingjian was puzzled, there was a knock on the door. She turned her head to look at the closed door. Who would knock at this time? Feng Qingjian stood up with doubts and came to the door to open it. She saw Jun mocking at the door. Under the moonlight, his blue and white long gown was like cold frost, which made him look particularly cold and elegant. Is there anything? Jun mocking said, I want to talk to you. Feng Qingjian couldn't sleep either, so she turned sideways to let him in, then come in. Jun mocking lifted his slender legs and came in. The layout of the guest room was roughly the same. He glanced at the guest room and sat down at the table. After Feng Qingjian closed the door, he also came to the table and sat down. He picked up the teapot and poured him a cup of tea. Jun Mocking glanced at the tea, but didn't drink it. Instead, he stared at her. Tonight, I want to stay. Feng Qingjian refused without thinking. No. Jun Mocking asked, why? Feng Qingjian said, aren't you asking knowingly? Men and women should not be intimate. You can't go beyond the line before confirming your identity. Jun Mocking knew that she was thinking wrongly. I just don't want to stay outside. Feng Qingjian vaguely guessed something and asked again uncertainly, what do you mean? I'll stay in the room. That won't work either. You slept in my arms last night. Last night, Feng Qingjian didn't know how she fell asleep. When she woke up in the morning, she found herself in Jun Mocking's arms. Although it was winter, she didn't feel cold in his arms at all, which also meant that Jun Mocking had been sending her internal energy all night. How deep must a person's internal energy be to be able to continuously send it to others all night? Jun Mocking called out, Feng-er. This was the first time Jun Mocking called her Feng-er. Feng Qingjian was stunned for a while and said with some sorrow, I am confused now. Jun Mocking comforted her, the truth will be revealed one day, don't worry so much. It's easy to say. Feng Qingjian sighed and stared at Jun Mocking's handsome face. The more she looked, the more handsome he was. 20 years ago, if she had seen such a handsome man, she would definitely be fascinated. A person who was obviously very cold and indifferent gave her a very gentle feeling, a little straightforward, but very considerate. Jun Mocking asked, aren't you going to rest? Feng Qingjian found that after Jun Mocking came, she was a little sleepy, although she was not sleepy at first. What about you? Jun Mocking said, I'll stay in the house. Feng Qingjian was stunned for a moment, thinking that he often stayed on the roof. In the East Palace, he would not stay at the door, right? After thinking about it, she let him go. You can stay, but you are not allowed to climb the bed. Jun Mocking nodded, yes. Feng Qingjian knew a little about Jun Mocking's character, so she got up and walked to the bed, lifted the quilt and went to bed. She just lay down. She glanced at Jun Mocking at the table, then closed her eyes. In fact, she didn't fall asleep, because there was a man in the room, and her vigilance prevented her from falling asleep quickly. Jun Mocking sat at the table, took the teacup to his lips and took a sip of tea. The tea was a little cold, and he didn't like it. Noticing that the person on the bed was breathing evenly, Jun Mocking stood up and walked to the bed, slowly sat down, and lowered his eyes to look at the person who was already sleeping. I don't know what she has experienced in the past 20 years, and why she has to remain a virgin. 20 years. The next day, Feng Guiyu told Feng Qingjian as soon as he finished breakfast. The Xiaogongsha is gone, which means that Dad is right. Mother's Xiaogongsha should have been added later. Feng Qingjian had guessed it, but she still couldn't believe it when she really heard it. If the Xiaogongsha is fake, only one person knows it, and that is the mother-in-law. I need to go back. She wants to go back to ask her mother-in-law. Jun Mocking said, I will go back with you. Feng Qingjian looked up at Jun Mocking, hesitated for a while, and nodded. Feng Guiyu knew about this in advance, so he had to be calm. I'll wait for you to come back here. Jun Mocking nodded, yes, I will come back as soon as possible. Feng Qingjian decided to go back, so she started packing her luggage and left the palace with Jun Mocking. Dao Tao and Susu cried and said they were reluctant to let their grandparents go when they learned that they were leaving. With Jun Mocking's comfort, the two little guys calmed down their sad mood. The day before Qin Xiao and Chen 11 got married, Feng Guiyu was preparing to have a dinner when she was called over by Xiao Jinyu. Sister-in-law, Yan is not feeling well, please let her have a look. Feng Guiyu asked as he walked, did you take the medicine on time? Xiao Jinyu said, I eat every day, but her complexion is still getting worse day by day, and her spirit is also tired all day long. Feng Guiyu frowned and came to Qiancheng Hall with doubts. Seeing concubine Han on the bed, her expression was indeed not as good as it was some time ago. Feng Wu was very clear about the medicine he prescribed. If there were no other problems, he would take the medicine on time and he would get better after taking it for a while. But concubine Han not only didn't get better, but got worse. Feng Wu took concubine Han's hand and began to diagnose her pulse. Xiao Jinyu was so anxious when he saw Yan was so ill that he didn't know what to do. After Feng Wu checked her pulse, she frowned. How could this happen? Xiao Jinyu asked, "Sister-in-law, what's wrong with Yan?" Feng Wu said, "If you take the medicine on time, how can it get worse and worse? If you continue, concubine Han may die soon." Xiao Jinyu was so flustered when he heard this. He looked down at the person on the bed, and when he thought that she might, he felt a sense of fear in his heart. He suddenly raised his head and looked at Feng Wu. "Sister-in-law, is there no way to save her? You must save her. Let me take a look." Feng Wu lowered his head and looked at concubine Han. His face was frighteningly pale. "Could someone have drugged you?" Xiao Jinyu roared like a madman when he heard this. "Who drugged her? Who dared to drug Yan? I will never spare her." Feng Wu said, "I'm just guessing, but it's not like drugging, it may be for other reasons." "Concubine Han, what discomfort do you usually feel?" "My body hurts a little, as if something is being sucked into me." "That feeling is very weird," concubine Han said as she thought. Feng Wu became even more confused after hearing this. What concubine Han said seemed like a dream. "Prince Yu, please carry concubine Han to the yard to bask in the sun." "Okay." Xiao Jinyu ordered the young eunuch to carry out the imperial concubine's chair and lay out a blanket before carrying concubine Han out. He placed concubine Han on the imperial concubine and took a thin quilt to cover her. The winter sun is exceptionally warm. Xiao Jinyu felt extremely distressed when he saw Yan's pale and bloodless face. "Yan, don't be afraid. My sister-in-law has very good medical skills. She will definitely have a way to save you." The sun was shining brightly, and concubine Han couldn't open her eyes. She could only squint at Xiao Jinyu. Seeing the worry in his eyes, he comforted her. "I'm fine, don't worry." Xiao Jinyu looked at him looking desperately ill. How could he not be worried? The thought of something happening to her makes her anxious. After putting Yan to sleep, Xiao Jinyu came to Feng Wu. "Sister-in-law, will Yan be fine?" How had Feng Wu ever seen Xiao Jinyu look so sad? He was obviously very anxious, but he had no choice but to do so. The dark circles under his eyes were very serious, and he knew that he had not slept well recently. If we can't find the reason and continue to be so weak. Good night, Spicy. Please support with monthly votes and recommendation votes. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 628. Xiao Jinyu asked, "What will happen?" Feng Wu said, "People can't live without blood. Concubine Zayan's current condition is that her blood deficiency is getting worse, and even taking supplements with medicine every day is too late." Xiao Jinyu was extremely anxious. How could this happen? Yan has always been in good health, how could he be suffering from blood deficiency? Feng Wu said, "The most important thing now is to find out the cause of the blood deficiency. But if it is not a physical cause, then it is an external factor. You can check the people in the palace to see if anyone is harmful to concubine Han." Although Feng Wu was just a salty fish before, he still knew a little about the internal fighting in the palace, whether it was due to physical reasons or external reasons. Xiao Jinyu understood immediately and lost his previous cynicism. "Sister-in-law, I understand, someone actually dares to harm Yan." Feng Wu ordered again, "Continue to take the medicine and don't stop it." Xiao Jinyu nodded, I took note of it. As soon as Feng Wu left, Xiao Jinyu called his subordinates, keep an eye on the people in the mansion and arrest anyone suspicious immediately. I obey my orders. Yang Wu immediately went to do it after receiving the order. Xiao Jinyu came out. He walked over slowly and squatted down in front of the imperial concubine's chair. He looked at concubine Han, who was sleeping soundly in the sun. Her bloodless cheeks were so white that they were almost transparent in the sun. In the past, Yan was just cooler and quieter. Why was he so sick and lifeless every day now? Xiao Jinyu felt distressed and sad. He suddenly remembered that after coming back from the battlefield, Yan's energy was not as good as before and he always fell asleep. Although Yan was quiet in the past, he did not sleep too much and waited for him to come back every day. Could it be that someone took advantage of his absence to attack Yan? Xiao Jinyu's eyes suddenly darkened. Who on earth hated Yan so much that he insisted on putting her to death? After getting enough sunshine, Xiao Jinyu carried Yan to his dormitory. After making arrangements, he came out of the dormitory. As soon as he came out, he saw Wan Xian standing at the door. At this time, he was in an irritable and angry mood, and his tone was naturally not much better. How did you come? Wan Xian blessed Fu Shen and raised her delicate face to look at Xiao Jinyu. Your Majesty, I personally cooked some food today and would like to have lunch with your Majesty. Xiao Jinyu refused without thinking, I am not free. Wan Xian was a thoughtful person, and she immediately noticed that Xiao Jinyu was in a bad mood at this time. Does the prince have anything important to deal with? Xiao Jinyu said with a sad look on his face, concubine Han is feeling unwell, and the cause has not been found out, so she is worried about this matter. Wan Xian stepped forward, held Xiao Jinyu's arm, and comforted her in a gentle voice, Your Majesty, don't worry, concubine Han has been in good health and will definitely recover soon. Xiao Jinyu found that Wan Xian was holding his arm, frowned, and pulled out his arm directly. Wan Xian, there are differences between men and women. Wan Xian's hand paused in mid-air and her face looked a little ugly. She was already married to Xiao Jinyu. He said there was a difference between men and women? My lord, I am already married to you. I am the prince's person in life and my ghost in death. Why is there any difference between men and women? Xiao Jinyu said seriously, Wan Xian, I told you that I only wanted to marry Yan. I married you because of the emperor's grandma. You are still innocent. In 2 days, the king will make it clear to his father. You will return if you continue to serve Grandma Huang. You can marry someone else in the future. When Wan Xian heard this, it was like a bolt from the blue. Her legs were a little weak, causing her to take 2 steps back. She was married in and then sent back. What did she think of her? Your Highness, I have already married you, and now you are sending me back. How will I behave in the future? How can I hold my head up in the palace? Wan Xian cried as she spoke, I'm just a weak woman, so why don't you let me go if the prince says you don't want me? Does this violate the rule of 7 outings? Does the prince want to treat me like this? Anyone who sees Chu Chu's pitiful appearance will feel unbearable. Xiao Jinyu is no exception. He knows how important a woman's reputation is. If Wan Xian is sent back, someone will gossip about her. It's a waste of time for you to stay in Qiancheng Palace. It's better to go back to Grandma Huang. She can make the decision and find a good marriage for you. My lord, if I marry you, I will be your woman. If you don't want me, I will die and don't marry anyone else, Wan Xian said as she looked at Xiao Jinyu with tears in her eyes, feeling extremely aggrieved. Xiao Jinyu didn't want to waste Wan Xian's time. Spending time in Qiancheng Palace would be equivalent to remaining a widow for the rest of his life. Seeing Wan Xian like this, he didn't know what to do for a while. After Wan Xian said this, Xiao Jinyu's original plan to send her away was shelved. He couldn't care about Wan Xian now. Yan's matter hadn't been resolved yet. She'll be fine. I know that you are a good girl. For the sake of your own lifelong happiness, you should carefully consider whether to remain a widow in Jiancheng Palace for the rest of your life, or to return to Grandma Huang and choose a lover. After Xiao Jinyu said this, he strode away. Wan Xian stood in the corridor, looking at Xiao Jinyu, who was striding away, holding a plain handkerchief tightly in her hand, her eyes full of unwillingness. Xiao Jinyu made it very clear that even if she married in, Xiao Jinyu would not touch her. However, she has already married in. If she were to go back, wouldn't she be drowned in spitting? She wouldn't put herself in that situation. As long as concubine Han is gone, she doesn't believe that Xiao Jinyu will have no feelings for her at all. Xiao Jinyu spent a whole day, but did not find the reason for Yan's blood deficiency. Yan's diet has always been taken care of by a special person, who is an old man in Jiancheng Hall. Yan is usually quiet and not so harsh to servants, so he will not make any grudges. It is even more difficult to investigate. At dinner, concubine Han only ate half a bowl and stopped eating. Xiao Jinyu wanted to coax her to eat more, but seeing that she was in low spirits, he could not bear to embarrass her, so he gave up. Yan, I will carry you to take a bath. Concubine Han nodded, okay. Although concubine Han has a slender figure, she is very soft in his arms, as if she has no bones. Xiao Jinyu felt very distressed. During this period, she has lost a lot of weight, and there is no meat on her waist and abdomen. Yan, you have lost weight. There is unspeakable distress in his words. Concubine Han looked up at Xiao Jinyu, do you despise me? Xiao Jinyu said, how could I despise you? I feel so sorry for you. It's all my fault. I didn't protect you well. When we got married, I vowed to protect you for the rest of your life. Concubine Han didn't expect him to take the blame on her, it's not your fault either. Yan, don't worry. I'm here and won't let anything happen to you. Xiao Jinyu paused here, stared at her for a long time, and said, when you're well, I'll send Wang Xin away and then make you my official wife. This time, even the King of Heaven can't stop me. In fact, it doesn't matter whether you're a concubine or a concubine. What matters is that your heart is with me, that's enough. After spending a few years with Xiao Jinyu, she still knows what kind of person he is and that his heart is with her. Wang Xin married in together, but Xiao Jinyu never consummated the marriage with her, which is already precious. That won't work either. How can the person I like always be a concubine? Xiao Jinyu hugged her into his arms. She used to be thin, but now he could clearly feel that her bones were a little uncomfortable. Just rest and recuperate. I will take care of these things. After these things are dealt with, I will take you to move out. You are the mistress and I will take care of the whole house for you, okay? Xiao Jinyu's tears fell unconsciously from the corners of his eyes, and he hurriedly raised his hand to wipe them away. Concubine Han chuckled, do you want to tire me to death? Xiao Jinyu smiled and said, how can I bear it? I will help you take care of it together, is this okay? Concubine Han said Xiao Jinyu bathed her while feeling distressed. During the break, Xiao Jinyu also hugged her tightly, but he didn't feel sleepy at all. Today is the wedding day of Qin Xiao and Chengzi, and Xiao Jinyan and Feng Wu will preside over the wedding. Chengzi was bathed by the nanny early in the morning and put on a bright red wedding dress. Feng Wu held the veil with auspicious dragon and phoenix, and watched Chengzi put on her wedding dress, her eyes full of joy. This was the first time she was not so excited because of the feast. After putting on her wedding dress, Chengzi slowly came to Feng Wu, her nose suddenly felt sore, and she cried, Master. Feng Wu was about to cover Chengzi with the red veil, and was surprised to see her crying. Today is a big day, why are you crying? Are you regretting it? What about Qin Xiao? Chengzi was crying the previous second, and laughed the next second, saying coquettishly, Master, how could I regret it? I just can't bear to leave you. Feng Wu smiled and said, aren't we all in the East Palace? We can still see each other every day. Chengzi said shyly, that's different. Outside the door, gongs and drums were beating, and firecrackers were blasting. Qin Xiao, wearing a wedding dress, led the wedding procession to the door of the Hehuan Hall in an orderly manner. The nanny stepped forward to remind, the auspicious time has come, and the bride should get on the sedan chair. Feng Wu knew the groom was coming when she heard the firecrackers, and joked, if Qin Xiao saw you like this now, he would definitely be fascinated. Chengzi blushed embarrassedly when she heard this, then knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Feng Wu. Feng Wu covered Chengzi's head with a red veil, covering her shy face at the same time. The nanny stepped forward to help Chengzi get on the sedan chair. Qin Xiao's eyes were always fixed on Chengzi in her new wedding dress. Even if he couldn't see her face, he couldn't take his eyes off her. A few days before the wedding, the two couldn't meet, so when they met, they naturally wanted to see more. Qin Xiao and Chengzi's pomp was very glorious among the servants, and I don't know how many people envied and jealous behind their backs. As the master of ceremonies, Feng Wu and Xiao Jinyan were already sitting on the high hall, watching the two newlyweds slowly walk in. At the reminder of the master of ceremonies, they bowed to heaven and earth, bowed to their parents, and then the couple bowed to each other. The process was lively and smooth. In the midst of the noise, Qin Xiao led Chengzi into the bridal chamber. After the newlyweds entered the bridal chamber, Feng Wu began to eat. Xiao Jinyan saw it and shook his head helplessly. He never forgot to eat. Feng Wu ate the chicken leg and said to Xiao Jinyan, Your Highness, you can have my eldest brother's wedding next month. I am happy just thinking about it. Xiao Jinyan's eyes were full of pampering. You only know how to eat? Feng Wu said, Your Highness doesn't understand. The fun of eating is that you can eat a lot of dishes. Xiao Jinyan did not comment. Qin Xiao had just sent Chengzi into the bridal chamber, and before he could say a few words, he was pulled out by his brothers to drink. They were all brothers who had been through life and death together. Qin Xiao was happy and had no scruples when he drank. After a few rounds, Qin Xiao was a little drunk. Wei Qi saw that his brothers could no longer stand and knew that they had drunk almost enough. Seeing that they were still toasting, he shouted at the top of his voice. Enough, enough, Qin Xiao is going to enter the bridal chamber tonight. As the saying goes, a night of spring is worth 1,000 gold. Brothers, don't ruin his good fortune. Brother Wei is right. If he passes out from drinking, how can Brother Qin enter the bridal chamber? Right, brothers. Then Brother Qin will have the advantage. Qin Xiao always wanted to go back to the room earlier, but the brothers were all happy tonight and in high spirits. They asked him to drink, and it was difficult to refuse. Fortunately, Wei Qi spoke for him. Qin Xiao patted his shoulder gratefully, Thank you, brother. I will help you next time you get married. After Qin Xiao finished speaking, he could not wait to go to the room. Wei Qi held the wine glass in his hand. Thinking of Lu Zhiyan's words, he, who was smiling just now had a sad face. He didn't have this opportunity. Wei Qi raised the wine glass in his hand and drank it all in one gulp. When he put it down, he saw Lu Zhiyan at the next table, who was also drinking. The sadness just now deepened. If Lu Zhiyan had said it earlier, he wouldn't have thought that he was incompetent for so long, and almost got depressed. The more Wei Qi thought about it, the more unhappy he became. He glanced at the wine pot on the table, picked it up and walked over. Lord Lu. Lu Zhiyan raised his head, saw Wei Qi, and greeted him with a smile, Brother Wei. Wei Qi raised the wine pot in his hand and filled the wine glass in Lu Zhiyan's hand. The posture made Lu Zhiyan a little scared. Brother Wei, what are you doing? Drinking. Wei Qi was unhappy, so he wanted to force Lu Zhiyan to drink to relieve his anger. Lu Zhayan thought of Brother Wei's strange behavior a few days ago. Could he still be angry? He raised the wine glass in confusion and drank it all in one gulp, then turned the cup down to show him that he had finished drinking. Who knew that Wei Qi poured him another full cup? Keep drinking. Lu Zhayan. Are you here to seek revenge? Lu Zhayan was forced to drink 3 cups of wine by Wei Qi. Seeing Wei Qi raise the wine pot to pour him wine again, he couldn't help but hold Wei Kai's hand. Brother Wei, you'll get drunk if you drink more. If you're drunk, I'll carry you back. Wei Qi is a warrior, and Lu Zhayan is a weak scholar. How can he stop him? A full glass of wine. Looking at Wei Kai's posture, I'm afraid he can't help but drink. Qin Xiao came all the way to the door of the room, and couldn't wait to push it open. Seeing the beautiful lady sitting on the bed, he walked in with a shaky step, turned around and closed the door tightly, fearing that the gang of brothers would come to make trouble in the bridal chamber. Changzi couldn't help but feel a little nervous when she heard the door open, and more shy. Listening to the steady footsteps coming towards the side step by step, her heart was like a deer beating wildly. Just when Changzi was nervous and shy, the big red veil was opened by Qin Xiao with a scale, and she also saw Qin Xiao in wedding clothes. Qin Xiao is a warrior, with a tall figure, a skin color that is neither white nor black, but a very handsome appearance. Just a glance, Changzi's face turned red, perhaps thinking of what will happen next. Good night. Please support me with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The new book has been revised and the editor is reviewing it. If there are no problems, it can be saved and published this month. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 629. Qin Xiao looked at Changzi in her wedding dress. Her makeup was more delicate than usual. She was a beautiful girl, but now she looked even more gorgeous. He stared at her for a long time. Changzi, I finally married you home. Changzi raised her red face. She just glanced at her and looked away. She found that Qin Xiao looked very good in her wedding dress. Qin Xiao usually didn't smile, but now he was smiling. He used to think he was a little silly, but now he looked very good. Changzi didn't say a word because she was shy. Qin Xiao was very excited but didn't forget to drink the wedding wine. He turned and came to the table. There was a wine pot and 2 wine glasses on the table. He picked up the wine pot and filled the 2 wine glasses. Then he came to the bed with the 2 wine glasses and handed one to Changzi. Changzi, let's drink the wedding wine. Yet Changzi took the wine glass from his hand with a shy face. When drinking the wedding wine, the 2 were very close. After drinking, they looked at each other in tacit understanding. One was nervous and the other was shy. Qin Xiao took the wine glass from Changzi's hand and placed it on the cabinet beside him. When he looked at Changzi again, he found that she lowered her head slightly, and her rosy face was hidden in the shadow. Let's go to bed. Changzi nodded shyly. I'll help you undress. Qin Xiao had never been served by anyone before. Now Changzi wanted to help him undress, and he stood up instinctively. I'll do it myself. As he said that, he began to take off his waist belt with a bit of urgency. Wedding clothes are more complicated than ordinary clothes, and they are not as fast to take off as ordinary clothes, but it is not difficult for Qin Xiao. Changzi watched Qin Xiao standing in front of him, taking off his clothes one by one, with neat movements, as if he was in a hurry. After a while, only the white inner garment was left. Changzi realized that she had been staring at Qin Xiao taking off his clothes. After Qin Xiao finished taking off his clothes, he looked up at Changzi and found that she was staring at him, looking at her wedding dress, which was bright red and matched her skin color very well. However, winter wedding dresses are heavy and complicated, and it might be difficult for a weak woman like her to take them off. I'll help you take them off. Qin Xiao has been following Xiao Jinyan for so many years, and under their subtle influence, their styles of behavior are very similar, Both of them are action-oriented. As he spoke, his hand had already reached out to untie her waist belt. Changzi was so embarrassed, but she didn't stop him. When bathing today, the old maid in the palace talked about how to scout her husband and what happened between husband and wife in bed. She should have undressed Qin Xiao, but it was the other way around. Thinking of what was about to happen, Changzi's face was even redder than before. Qin Xiao undressed Changzi, not as casually as he did for himself, but with a bit of caution and expectation. The woman in front of him was the one he wanted to marry, his wife, and the one who would accompany him for life. Entering the bridal chamber, which man would not be excited? Qin Xiao was a normal man. They had never even touched hands when they met, not because he didn't want to. Now that they were married, holding hands and any intimate actions were acceptable. Qin Xiao carefully took off her clothes one by one until only the red belly band inside was left. Changzi's skin was very white, and under the dim light, it was still dazzling. Qin Xiao suddenly felt a little dry in the mouth and swallowed hard, then bent down to pick up Changzi and laid her flat on the big red bed. Looking at Changzi's face as red as an apple, he couldn't help but want to take a bite. Qin Xiao did take a bite, but it was just her red lips. Feng Wu hadn't eaten for a long time. She ate a lot at the wedding banquet today and ended up eating too much. When they went back, Xiao Jinyan carried her back. Although Feng Wu could eat, she didn't gain weight and didn't weigh much, so Xiao Jinyan could easily hold her. In the East Palace, no one didn't know how much His Highness doted on the crown princess. Back in the bedroom, Feng Wu lay on the bed, touching her belly, and smiled at Xiao Jinyan. "Your Highness, look at my belly, does it look like a pregnant belly?" Xiao Jinyan looked at her bulging belly, and suddenly remembered the year when she was pregnant, when he rushed back overnight and saw her pregnant belly. The belly at that time was bigger and rounder than it is now. He stretched out his slender fingers and touched her bulging belly. The belly after eating was not as hard as a pregnant belly, but very soft, with fair and delicate skin, and it felt very good. He raised his head and looked at Feng Wu. As the host of the wedding today, she was not dressed as casually as usual, and because she was the crown princess, she was dressed dignified and elegant. Feng Wu found that Xiao Jinyan had been staring at her, and asked in confusion, "Your Highness, what's wrong?" Xiao Jinyan smiled and shook his head, "Nothing. I'm so tired, I have to take off this outfit quickly, and this golden hairpin make my neck sore." When Feng Wu was muttering, her hands had already reached to both sides and took off the golden hairpin, and her head instantly felt lighter. Feng Wu usually wears everything simply, even if it is simple, she has to look like a princess. Xiao Jinyan still knows her personality very well, likes to dress comfortably, and she is afraid that she is exhausted today. "I will help you." Feng Wu was naturally happy to have someone to serve her. "Okay." Xiao Jinyan picked her up horizontally, came to the dressing table, put her on the chair, and took off the hairpin from her hair with his slender fingers. He was busy on weekdays and had never helped Xiaju remove her makeup. When the black long hair came down, he found the fun in it. His slender fingers touched the hair on her shoulders and praised, "Xiaju's hair is softer than silk, making people love it." Feng Wu raised his head and looked at the two people in the mirror. His eyes fell on Xiao Jinyan and he saw him playing with her hair. "It feels the same when I touch your hair." He had seen Xiaju's ability to flatter others and smiled helplessly. After removing her makeup, Xiao Jinyan's hand came to her waist, first untied her waist belt, then her clothes. He had done this action countless times, but his anticipation had never diminished. After taking off her gorgeous clothes, Xiao Jinyan was afraid of the cold and picked her up again and brought her to the bed. Feng Wu looked up at Xiao Jinyan and suddenly thought of his father and mother. "It's been a few days since my father and mother left. I wonder if everything went well. Dad is not an ordinary person." We should believe in his ability. Xiao Jinyan comforted her while taking off the last piece of clothing on her body. Feng Wu naturally knew her father's ability, but there was nothing absolute in the world, so she was still a little worried. However, Feng Wu soon had no time to think about these things. She found that Xiao Jinyan had been quite energetic these 2 days. After the wedding banquet, Lu Ziyan held onto the wall for a long time before taking a few steps. It was the first time that he drank so much that his legs were weak. At this time, he was a little drunk and found someone next to him. He instinctively reached out to help him, but he fell into a wall, but it didn't hurt. Wei Qi had been standing beside Lu Ziyan, just to see him make a fool of himself. Today was his brother's big day, and he also drank a lot of wine, but it was much better than Lu Ziyan. Lu Ziyan was not a drinker, and he was completely drunk by Wei Qi tonight. Wei Qi saw that Lu Ziyan was about to fall, so he kindly helped him up. Seeing that Lu Ziyan's face was flushed, he regretted for forcing him to drink so much wine just now. Can you still walk? Lu Ziyan was still self-aware and shook his head. Wei Qi sighed, bent down, and directly carried Lu Ziyan, and walked out with big strides. Lu Ziyan had drunk too much, and now he was carried on Wei Kai's shoulders, with his upper body hanging upside down on Wei Qi, feeling uncomfortable and nauseous. He was just a weak scholar, and he struggled a few times to get down, but was firmly pressed on his shoulders by Wei Kai's big hands. Lord Lu, we'll be there soon, Wei Qi said, and his feet were like the wind, and he walked very fast. Lu Ziyan on his shoulders was not so comfortable, and his stomach was churning violently when bumping, and he wanted to vomit but held it back, and his face was red. After Wei Qi carried Lu Ziyan back to his residence, he put him down. Lord Lu, we're here. Before he finished speaking, he heard a wow. Wei Qi looked at Lu Ziyan lying on him and vomited, without even giving him a chance to react. Lu Ziyan was at the limit of endurance and couldn't bear it anymore. After vomiting, his stomach felt much better, but he was not sober yet. He leaned back and was about to fall, but was pulled back by Wei Qi to stabilize him. Looking at the drunken Lu Ziyan, he regretted for forcing Lu Ziyan to drink because of his momentary depression. As a result, when he was drunk, he was not only responsible for carrying the load, but also for cleaning up the filth. There were palace maids serving Lu Ziyan, but the palace maids were too weak to move Lu Ziyan, who was more than 1.8 meters tall. In the end, it was Wei Qi who took off Lu Ziyan's clothes. Although Lu Ziyan was a scholar, he was not thin at all. On the contrary, he had flesh when he took off his clothes, but it was not tendon flesh, but soft flesh, white. I didn't expect that you had quite a lot of flesh on your body, soft. He tried the feel of it specially. But he had a well-proportioned figure and looked good in clothes. Wei Qi picked up Lu Ziyan and went straight to the bathtub, put him in, and moved neatly without a trace of hesitation. While Lu Ziyan was bathing, he took off his outer robe and threw it outside because the smell was too bad. When he looked back, he found that Lu Ziyan, who was sitting well, had slipped into the bathtub with his head. Wei Qi was startled and ran over quickly to pick him up. He felt Lu Ziyan's breath and luckily he was still breathing. I was scared to death. He killed the supervisor of the Imperial Observatory, so he will die tomorrow. After the drowning incident, Wei Qi never dared to neglect it again and had to be careful when bathing him. It's all because of your words that I have a shadow in my heart, Wei Qi couldn't help complaining. He felt that it was Lu Ziyan who calculated his marriage and didn't tell him the truth that caused the shadow. After bathing, Wei Qi packed Lu Ziyan and sent him to the bed, watching him still struggling, humming, as if he was uncomfortable. Wei Qi sighed and told the maid at the door, "Serve Lord Lu well, I'm going back." He then strode out. Before he even walked out of the door, the maid caught up with him again. "Lord Wei," Lord Lu fell off the bed. Wei Qi paused when he heard this, turned around and ran back, and when he stepped into the threshold, he saw Lu Zhayan lying on the ground with his quilt barely covering his important parts. No wonder the maid came to call him. Which girl would be embarrassed if she saw him? Wei Qi walked over helplessly, bent down, picked up the person on the ground, and put him back on the bed. The maid brought warm water and wiped Lu Zhayan's cheek carefully. Wei Qi watched from the side. Lu Zhayan was 26 years old this year, and his appearance was also famous for being handsome. Thinking of his soft flesh, no wonder he couldn't carry anything on his shoulders or hands. After the palace maid finished wiping, she saw Wei Qi. He was wearing very thin clothes. In such a cold weather, he could easily catch wind chill. She asked cautiously, "Does Mr. Wei want to take a bath?" Wei Qi couldn't wait to go back just now because he wanted to take a shower. His body was so sticky that he felt uncomfortable. Lu Zhayan was drunk and he couldn't leave for the time being, so he ordered, "Prepare some hot water." Here the palace maid carried the basin and went out. Not long after, the palace maid came in and reminded, "Master Wei, the hot water is ready." Wei Qi glanced at Lu Zhayan on the bed, then turned and walked out. "When I came back from bathing, it was dead of night." Lu Zhayan never stopped on the bed and was still humming. Wei Qi walked over with curiosity and leaned closer to hear what he was humming. Don't drink any more, my stomach will burst if I drink any more, brother Wei, can't it be okay if I was wrong?" Wei Qi. It seems that he was really pushed hard. He can't do it like this next time. Wei Qi was about to sit up when he heard Lu Zhayan hum again, my pillow, where is the pillow?" Wei Qi glanced at the pillow under Lu Zhayan's head and found that Lu Zhayan had been looking for the pillow. He kindly pulled the pillow out and saw something falling out from under the pillow. He bent down and picked it up. It was a purse. He opened it curiously and found a note inside the purse. He subconsciously glanced at Lu Zhayan, who was still looking for a pillow. It shouldn't matter if he took a look, right? Just take a look. After making up his mind, Wei Qi took out the note from his wallet, then slowly opened it and found a paragraph written on the note. After reading it, I realized that this was no ordinary note, but a slogan. There are two names on it, one of them is him. Although Wei Qi is a martial artist, it doesn't mean he doesn't understand anything. He vaguely guessed the meaning above, and then looked at Lu Zhayan on the bed, with an incredible look in his eyes. "So you know it, you have known it for a long time." How could he forget that Lu Zhayan could tell fortunes and predict marriages? How could he not know? Wei Qi stood up suddenly and was about to leave, but found that he still had the wallet and note in his hand. He returned to the bed, stuffed the note into the wallet, and put it back under the pillow. After doing all this, Wei Qi left. The next day, the happy atmosphere still remained in the East Palace. Feng Guiyu and Xiao Jinyan were sitting on the throne. Qin Xiao brought his newlywed daughter-in-law to serve tea to the two masters. While serving tea, Feng Guiyu looked at Chengzi. After she got married, her hair had become tangled, her face was shy, and she was a little more delicate than before. After serving tea, Xiao Jinyan and Feng Guiyu gave red envelopes to the two newcomers. Xiao Jinyan said, "Everyone, get up." "Thank you, Master." Qin Xiao then helped Chun 11 up. Lu 11 walked in without moving. "Your Highness, Mr. Lu is here." "Good night, Spicy." Please support with monthly votes and recommendation votes. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Iyun Si. Chapter 630. Chapter 628. Lu Zhayan wants to explain, Xiaoju's old friends on the mountain. "What is Lord Lu doing here so early?" Xiao Jinyan ordered, "Let him in." Yes. After Lu 11 left, Lu Zhayan bowed and walked in. Before Lu Zhayan came in, Qin Xiao led Chengzi out. After coming out, Chengzi immediately lost the spirit of serving tea just now, and her pace slowed down. Qin Xiao tossed until 4 o'clock last night, and her waist is still weak now. If she hadn't served tea to the prince and the princess, she probably wouldn't have been able to get up. Qin Xiao found that Chengzi walked very slowly, guessing that she was tired. While feeling distressed, he also regretted his actions last night. If it happened again, he would still lose control. Go back and rest for a while. Chengzi was a little embarrassed. It's broad daylight, it's not good. Qin Xiao said, didn't the princess ask you to rest for a few more days? There's nothing wrong with that. Chengzi was used to serving Feng Wu, where could she rest? But now it is really a bit powerless. Before Chengzi could react, her body suddenly flew into the air and was held horizontally by Qin Xiao. Chengzi was frightened, and instinctively reached out to hug Qin Xiao's neck, and whispered, "Put me down quickly, it would be bad if people saw it." In the past, Qin Xiao didn't even dare to hold hands openly, let alone hug. Now it's different, they are husband and wife, and if his wife is uncomfortable, he can hug her openly. It's okay, they all know we are husband and wife. In the past, when she saw the prince hugging the princess, she felt so sweet, and the prince loved the princess. Now it was inappropriate for her, probably because of her status. Chengzi blushed, that can't be so ostentatious. Qin Xiao didn't care, and strode towards his wedding room with Chengzi in his arms. Wei Qi came back from outside and happened to see Qin Xiao holding Chengzi and leaving. He couldn't help but sigh that tough guys are also good at pampering their wives, holding them wherever they go. Asterisk. Lu Zheyan walked into the main hall and saw the crown prince and the crown princess. He stepped forward and saluted, "I pay my respects to your highness and the crown princess." "Xiao Jinyan, get up." "Thank you, your highness." Lu Zheyan stood up slowly. Xiao Jinyan asked, "Lord Lu, you came here early in the morning, is there something wrong?" Lu Zheyan had a splitting headache when he woke up today. He didn't remember what happened last night. He heard something from the palace maids and knew that it was Wei Qi who took care of him last night. He came here early in the morning to clear up the misunderstanding, but he didn't find Wei Qi. "Your Highness, I'm fine." Xiao Jinyan's face darkened, "Nothing, you came to the East Palace early in the morning." He was planning to take Xiaoju to have breakfast. Xiaoju should be starving now. Lu Zheyan has been with Xiao Jinyan for so many years. He knew that His Highness was unhappy when he heard his tone. "Your Highness, I'm here to find the guard Wei." "Xiao Jinyan, then go find him." Lu Zheyan said cautiously, "I didn't find him." "Xiao Jinyan." Lu Zheyan asked boldly, "Your Highness, do you know where the guards are?" Xiao Jinyan ordered, "Lu 11, take Lord Lu to find Wei Qi." "Yes." Lu 11 took 2 steps forward and said with a smile, "Lord Lu, please." "I will take my leave." After Lu Zheyan finished his greetings, he followed Lu 11 out. Xiao Jinyan stood up, took Feng Wu's hand, and said softly, "Let's have dinner." Feng Wu looked at Xiao Jinyan, who had an unhappy face just now, and was very gentle at this time. She was indeed hungry and had been waiting to have breakfast with Xiao Jinyan. 3 days later in the morning, Xiao Jinyu hurried to the East Palace and took Feng Wu away. "Sister-in-law, go see Ian." Feng Wu knew from Xiao Jinyu's expression that concubine Han's condition might be getting worse again. Xiao Jinyu's eyes were red with anxiety. "Sister-in-law, Ian has been sleeping since last night and hasn't woken up yet." Feng Wu had a bad feeling when she heard Xiao Jinyu's choking voice, and she soothed her gently, "I'll go see her first, don't worry." When she arrived at Jiancheng Hall, Feng Wu saw concubine Han on the bed. Her face looked even uglier than the previous few days, and her lips were pale, obviously her blood deficiency had worsened. She took concubine Han's hand and placed 2 fingers on her pulse. Xiao Jinyu stood aside, moving her gaze from concubine Han to Feng Wu, waiting for the pulse diagnosis results. Feng Wu frowned, with an incredible look in his eyes. "Only 3 days have passed, how could it become like this?" Concubine Han's blood is already seriously deficient, and I'm afraid it will be exhausted now. Xiao Jinyu usually looks casual and unruly, but he is not stupid. Hearing Feng Wu's tone, he has a bad feeling in his heart. He grabbed Feng Wu's hand and said in a very pleading tone, "Sister-in-law, please save her." Feng Wu certainly wanted to save Concubine Han, but Concubine Han's blood seemed to be lost in large quantities every day, and her body could not keep up with the blood production, and the medicine had no effect. It's not that there is no effect, but that the blood loss is too fast and there is no time to produce blood. How can a person live without blood? Looking at Xiao Jinyu's red eyes, tears in his eyes, as if they would burst out in a second. She had never seen Xiao Jinyu like this. I'll think of a way. Feng Wu first used a silver needle to wake up Concubine Han, who was sleeping, and saw Concubine Han's weak appearance, feeling helpless. I'll go to prepare the medicine. Feng Wu said this and strode away. When he returned to the East Palace, he opened the medicine box and took out the medicinal materials from it. In fact, he took them out from the space and added spiritual spring water. Lingquan water can detoxify, but it can also be used with precious medicinal materials to prolong life. The most important thing now is to prolong life and then find out the problem. It takes time to prepare the medicine. Xiao Jinyu has been crying anxiously. Ian could still chat with him normally 2 days ago, but now he doesn't even have the strength to speak. He seems very tired and sleepy. He held Han Concubine's hand tightly and choked up and said, "Ian, sister-in-law has gone to prepare the medicine. You will be fine, do you know?" Han Concubine's vision was a little blurry. She wanted to open her eyes to see more clearly, but she had no strength at all. "Well, I'll sleep for a while." The voice was so soft that it could only be heard clearly when you get close. "Ian, let's not sleep, okay? Hold on a little longer and wait for sister-in-law to come back." Xiao Jinyu was afraid that it would be difficult for her to wake up after the sleep. Han Concubine only felt that her eyelids were heavy and she could hardly open them, but she nodded. "Ian, when you get better, I'll take you out to play. You can go wherever you want. I won't leave you alone at home for so long. What do you say?" Concubine Han nodded, as if she agreed. Xiao Jinyu found that her eyes were about to close, and her hands couldn't help but clench. "Ian, open your eyes and look at me and talk, okay?" Seeing that Ian didn't respond, he asked again, "Do you want some water?" Concubine Han still didn't respond. Xiao Jinyu was anxious. He stood up and ran out, wanting to find Feng Wu. Before he ran out of the door, Feng Wu came. He wiped a tear. "Sister-in-law, look quickly, Ian fainted again." Hearing this, Feng Wu walked over quickly and saw that Concubine Han's eyes were closed, obviously fainted. "Prince Yu, pick up Concubine Han," Feng Wu ordered and turned to the table. Xiao Jinyu sat down on the bed, stretched out his arms and carefully helped Concubine Han up. Feng Wu took out a teacup, poured the medicine into it, then picked up the teapot, poured hot water into it, and then walked to the bed with the teacup. "Feed this medicine to Concubine Han." Xiao Jinyu took the teacup without saying a word, pinched Concubine Han's jaw with one hand, and fed the medicine bit by bit, which was much faster than using a spoon. Feng Wu saw it, and suddenly remembered that when she was unconscious, Xiao Jinyan fed her medicine in this way. As expected, they were brothers, and they had the same posture for feeding medicine. Some of the medicine spilled, but most of it was fed in. After feeding the medicine, Xiao Jinyu looked up at Feng Wu. "Sister-in-law, when can a Yan wake up?" Feng Wu said, "We have to wait. If it were in modern times, direct blood transfusion would be faster, and blood transfusion would keep her alive. In ancient times, there was no tool to check blood type, otherwise she could help Concubine Han with blood transfusion. Have you found the reason?" When mentioning this, Xiao Jinyu's eyes dimmed with a bit of anger. "No, Ian has not made enemies with others, and the people in Jiancheng Hall have no ill will towards Ian. I really can't think of who wants to harm Ian. Feng Guiu has been with concubine Han several times. She is a very quiet woman, noble in her coldness. She disdains to care about certain people and certain things. Such a woman is indeed not easy to offend people. Just when Feng Guiu was puzzled, Lu Eleven's shrill voice came from the door, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince has arrived. She turned her head and looked at the door. Why did Xiao Jinyan come? As soon as Lu 11 finished speaking, Xiao Jinyan walked in wearing a black court dress. At a glance, she knew that he had just come after the court. She stepped forward and bowed, Your Highness. When Xiao Jinyan returned to the East Palace, he didn't see Xiaju. He learned that she came to Jiancheng Hall and came twice in a short time, still with medicine. Thinking that Xiao Jinyu was sick, he rushed over as soon as possible. Is you are sick? Feng Guiu explained, No, Your Highness, it's concubine Han who is sick. Xiao Jinyan looked at the bed and saw Xiao Jinyu holding concubine Han. After not seeing her for a long time, he found that concubine Han had become much thinner and her face was pale. He walked over. What's wrong with concubine Han? Xiao Jinyu raised his head. Xiao Jinyan saw his red eyes and was stunned for several seconds. Crown Prince. Feng Guiu told concubine Han's condition one by one for him. After listening, Xiao Jinyan immediately understood and looked at Xiao Jinyu again. Do you mean someone wants to harm concubine Han? Sister-in-law said that Ian is fine, but he is bleeding severely. He loses blood every day. If it continues, Ian is afraid. Xiao Jinyu couldn't say the last few words. He hugged Ian tightly, with fear in his eyes. Blood loss, Xiao Jinyan frowned. Feng Guiu explained, It seems that there is a gap in concubine Han's body. Blood disappears from the gap every day. The body cannot produce blood in time, so it loses too much blood, and the blood loss cannot keep up with the speed of loss. Xiao Jinyan is smart and wise. He quickly understood what Xiaju meant. If the blood loss continues, the person will die. If it is man-made, then thoroughly investigate the entire Jiancheng Palace to see who is behind it. Xiao Jinyu said, I have checked it, but there is no clue. Xiao Jinyan saw that his brother had lost a lot of weight and had serious dark circles under his eyes. With this appearance, how could he have the heart to investigate it clearly? I remember that you have another concubine. Is she not suspicious? Xiao Jinyu suddenly raised his head and looked at Xiao Jinyan. Brother Crown Prince said Wangzhen. Xiao Jinyan asked, Has concubine Wan ever served you in bed? Xiao Jinyu shook her head, I have never been to her room. I have also told her that I want to send her back to the Empress Dowager, but she doesn't want to go back. You should not have the intention to harm others, but you must be on guard against others. She has been married to you for a long time and has never been in bed with you. I am afraid she has some thoughts in her mind. Xiao Jinyan has seen many women in the palace fighting openly and secretly, and that Wangzhen might be one of them. Feng Guiu almost forgot about Wangzhen, and only remembered it after Xiao Jinyan mentioned it. I think what your highness said makes sense. Those women in the East Palace are very vicious. Xiao Jinyu felt that what her brother said made sense. She had been thinking about Ian recently and had indeed neglected it. I know, Prince brother. If Wangzhen dares to harm Ian, I will never let her go. Xiao Jinyan and Xiao Jinyu are the same kind of people, so they naturally understand him. Feng Guiu took the pulse of concubine Han again and confirmed that she was fine for the time being, and then went back to the East Palace with Xiao Jinyan. In the afternoon, Feng Guiu took a medical book and looked through it, trying to see if there was any other way to save concubine Han. Suichuan lay lazily beside Feng Guiu. It was rare that Susu didn't pull its ears, so it could sleep well. Susu and Dao Tao were taken by the queen to play. Xiao Jinyan didn't expect to see Wang Leiwen and Wang Jingyuan again. Just half an hour ago, he learned that the third prince and princess of the Sien Miao tribe came to visit, and he received them personally. "I didn't expect you to be the Prince of Daxia." This was the first sentence Wang Leiwen said when they met. After being separated for so long, she decided to bring her third brother to Daxia to visit Lin Xian. She thought that her third brother would not agree, but she didn't expect that her third brother agreed without saying a word. Xiao Jinyan explained, "I lost my memory before, but later I recovered my memory." Wang Leiwen smiled, "So that's it?" Wang Jingyuan looked at Xiao Jinyan. Shen Shuwei did not lie to him. He was Xiao Jinyan, the Prince of Daxia. There are still some changes from the past. "Where's the crown princess?" Wang Leiwen was a little shocked when she heard this. "You have a crown princess?" Xiao Jinyan nodded, "Yes, the crown princess is in the East Palace." Without waiting for Wang Jingyuan to speak, Wang Leiwen couldn't wait to say, "I want to see her." She wanted to see how beautiful the crown princess was, and whether Xiao Jinyan would like her. Wang Jingyuan said, "I want to see her too." Xiao Jinyan glanced at Wang Jingyuan. He knew Xiaoju, and Xiaoju would be very happy if she knew he was here. "I don't know what he thinks of Xiaoju. I'll take you to see her." East Palace. Xiao Jinyan led the brother and sister into the East Palace and went straight to the Hehuan Palace. Dabai smelled the smell of a stranger and walked towards the side, growling in warning. Wang Leiwen saw a ferocious white tiger walking towards the side, and was scared to lean towards Wang Jingyuan. "Why is there a tiger here?" Wang Jingyuan protected his sister behind him, and looked at the approaching white tiger with vigilance. Xiao Jinyan glanced at Dabai and explained, "This is Susu's pet. Good night, babies. Please support with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 631. Susu is a nickname. Such an intimate name makes it easy for people to think that she is Xiao Jinyan's princess consort. Wang Leiwen frowned. How can a woman keep a tiger as a pet? She is a shrew. How could Xiao Jinyan like such a woman? Is it because of a political marriage? In the royal family, political marriage is the most normal thing. It must be so. Wang Leiwen thought so and felt that he still had a chance. Dabai looked up at Xiao Jinyan and did not approach them. Xiao Jinyan retracted his gaze and continued to walk forward with the two of them. After several twists and turns, they arrived at the bedroom. Along the way, the palace maids and eunuchs bowed and saluted. Since Feng Guiu became the princess consort, the number of palace maids and eunuchs serving her has increased from 6 to 16. Feng Guiu was absorbed in reading a medical book, and suddenly heard a palace maid say, "Master, the prince is here." She looked up at the door and saw a black figure walking in. The maid stepped out in small steps. Feng Guiu did not stand up to salute, because Xiao Jinyan said that in his own bedroom, when no one is around, there is no need to salute. "Your Highness, aren't you very busy today?" "Yes, I brought 2 guests," Xiao Jinyan said and looked at the door. Wang Jingyuan and Wang Leiwen walked in one after the other. Feng Guiu followed Xiao Jinyan's line of sight to the door, and saw Wang Jingyuan at first sight. He had seen him before in the Sien Miao tribe, so he recognized him at a glance. Unexpectedly, they met again after a few months of separation, and she couldn't help but feel a little excited. She put down the medical book in her hand and began to put on her embroidered shoes. Wang Jingyuan saw the woman on the couch. She was wearing pink clothes, pink and delicate, completely different from the last time they met. She was dressed very elegantly this time. At the beginning, she did not lie to him. She was Xiao Jinyan's crown princess. Wang Leiwen then walked in and saw the woman on the couch. She felt that she looked familiar. After thinking about it carefully, she suddenly opened her eyes wide. Are you the miracle doctor? Feng Guiu saw that Wang Leiwen was also here, and her excitement was reduced by half. She did not forget what the princess had in mind for Xiao Jinyan. Xiao Jinyan said, she is my princess consort. In order to find me, she disguised herself as a man to go to the Xin Miao tribe. Wang Leiwen was shocked for a long time. At first, she did not expect that the miracle doctor was a woman disguised as a man, and she did not expect that she was the princess consort. She was so scheming. No wonder she did not find it. When Feng Guiu was in the Xin Miao tribe, she did not know that she was Feng Guiu. Now that her memory has recovered, she also remembers Wang Jingyuan. She looked at Wang Jingyuan. She had not seen him for 10 years, and he had changed a lot. Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and looked at Xiaju, only to see her staring at Wang Jingyuan without blinking. He glanced at Wang Jingyuan again and found that he was also staring at Xiaju, and his eyes darkened. Wang Jingyuan smiled and said, it's been a long time since we last met. You seem to be doing well. Feng Guiu's eyebrows curved. Brother A1, long time no see. Wang Jingyuan hadn't heard anyone call him that for a long time. Now that he heard it, he was stunned, as if he couldn't believe it. You call me Brother A1. Feng Guiu stepped forward a few steps, came to Xiao Jinyan, and smiled at Wang Jingyuan. Yes, I have always called you that. Wang Jingyuan was stunned for a moment, then reacted, with a look of surprise in his eyes, are you Xiaju? Feng Guiu nodded, yes, I have remembered everything. I didn't expect you to be Xiaju. They all said you were missing. Wang Jingyuan was so excited that he didn't know what to say. It's a blessing to return safely. He glanced at Xiao Jinyan again. I didn't expect that you would marry Xiao Jinyan in the end. Feng Guiu raised his head and looked at Xiao Jinyan. He just lowered his eyes, and their eyes met. The former was happy and the latter was relieved. Wang Leiwen recovered from the shock and didn't want to admit that Feng Guiu's women's clothing was more stunning than men's clothing. She was just beautiful, nothing special. She raised her head and asked Wang Jingyuan, brother, do you know her? Wang Jingyuan nodded, yes, I met her when I went to Nanzhao Kingdom. She is Princess Zhuyu. Princess Zhuyu? When Wang Jingyuan came back from Nanzhao Kingdom, Wang Leiwen was curious and pulled Wang Jingyuan to talk about some things in Nanzhao Kingdom. Among them, Princess Zhuyu was mentioned. Princess Zhuyu is the daughter of the national teacher. Wang Leiwen stared at Feng Guiu for a long time. She was Princess Zhuyu, and her status was more noble than that of a royal princess. For a moment, he was so shocked that he couldn't speak. As the Prince of Daxia, Xiao Jinyan should treat them well because Wang Leiwen was his savior. He ordered the maid to bring some cakes and a pot of good tea. Feng Guiu chatted with Wang Jingyuan for a long time. She still hadn't forgotten Wang Jingyuan's illness. Brother A1, how is your health recently? Have you had an attack? Wang Jingyuan felt warm at the words. He didn't expect that she still remembered his illness. I have been taking medicine. I have no attacks. But sometimes I feel very tired. I sleep enough at night, but I still want to sleep during the day. Feng Guiu knows Wang Jingyuan's health better than anyone else. She feels very sad when she thinks that he will not live long. I will take your pulse later. Wang Jingyuan replied, okay. Wang Leiwen drank tea and glanced at Xiao Jinyan opposite. He is now the prince, that is, the future crown prince. There are 3 palaces, 6 courtyards, and 72 concubines. She still has hope. If she can't be the crown princess, being a concubine is not bad. The important thing is to stay with him. After meeting Xiao Jinyan, Wang Leiwen looked at the men around him. No matter in appearance or temperament, they were all not as good as Xiao Jinyan. If you want to marry, you should marry a man like Xiao Jinyan to live your life in vain. Your Highness, I am new to Daxia and am not familiar with this place. How about you accompany me around? Xiao Jinyan said, Princess, you want to go out to play? I will ask Prince Chang to accompany you later. I still have many official duties to be busy with. Wang Leiwen was a little dissatisfied. Are you that busy? Can't you do it later? Xiao Jinyan explained, my father has just recovered from a serious illness. All the affairs of the court are handled by this palace. Official affairs are heavy and urgent and cannot be delayed. Wang Jingyuan looked at his sister. He still knew what she was thinking. Leun, don't make trouble unreasonably. Wang Leiwen replied unconvinced, how could I be unreasonable? Wang Jingyuan ignored Wang Leiwen. He looked at Xiao Jinyan and said apologetically, His Royal Highness has heavy official duties and does not need to accompany him personally. Xiao Jinyan said, I'm sorry. After Xiao Jinyan left, Feng Guiu checked Wang Jingyuan's pulse. Wang Jingyuan waited quietly. Feng Guiu's eyebrows were a little solemn. Wang Jingyuan's body did not miraculously improve, but was maintained by medicine. When I'm done with this, I'll prepare some more medicine for you. The source of concubine Han's illness has never been found. She was looking through medical books today just to see if there was any way to treat it. So there was no time to prepare the medicine for the time being, and she needed to prepare a new prescription, which would not be a short period of time. Wang Jingyuan said warmly, don't worry, there are still some medicines you prepared last time. Wang Leiwen was unwilling to give up. He looked at Feng Guiu sitting opposite and asked tentatively, there should be many women around His Royal Highness, right? As soon as Feng Guiu picked up the teacup, she heard Wang Leiwen's words and raised her eyes to look at her. There were many women before, but now there are not many. Wang Leiwen's eyes were full of doubts. What do you mean? Feng Guiu raised the teacup, took 2 sips of tea, and said quietly, this is a matter within the palace, there is no need to explain it to you in detail, right? Wang Leiwen frowned with some dissatisfaction. The prince could not be the only one beside the prince. There must be other women. Xiao Jinyan came back after finishing what he was doing and saw Wang Leiwen and Wang Jingyuan still in Hehuan Hall. I have asked someone to prepare a sumptuous dinner. The prince and princess will have dinner together later. When Wang Leiwen saw Xiao Jinyan coming back, he stood up happily and said, okay, this is my first time coming to Daxia. I just want to try Daxia's delicacies. Wang Jingyuan said, it is better to obey orders than to be respectful. Suddenly, a sweet and milky voice came from outside the door, Father, I'm back from home. Susu held the door with both hands, crossed the threshold with her short legs, then ran in and threw herself into Xiao Jinyan's arms. Father, I want more meat for dinner. Xiao Jinyan knelt down in front of his daughter, his face flushed as he ran, and he said warmly, okay, let me prepare 60 meatballs for you for dinner, how about it? Susu held Xiao Jinyan's handsome face in her hands and said, Father, the hottest one is the best. Wang Leiwen saw a baby about 3 years old, with disbelief and shock in his eyes. You have a daughter, this was something she didn't expect. Father, king, mother, concubine. Dao Tao held the door and ran in neatly with short legs. When he saw his sister nestled in his father's arms, he threw himself into the arms of his mother and concubine. Concubine, I memorized the 3-character sutra today. Feng Guiu looked at his son and praised, Dao Tao is very powerful. Wang Leiwen opened her eyes wide again. Not only did she have a daughter, she also had a son, and the 2 babies looked alike. Even Wang Jingyuan was surprised when he saw 2 identical dolls. The 2 dolls were about 3 years old, which meant that Xiao Ju had been married to Xiao Jinyan for several years. They actually had no news at all. Xiao Jinyan hugged Susu and looked at Wang Leiwen and Wang Jingyuan, they are twins Dao Tao and Susu, the children of me and the crown princess. Wang Leiwen received too much information today and couldn't digest it for a while. When he reacted, he was still surprised. However, it is normal for a man like Xiao Jinyan to get married early and have children. Wang Jingyuan looked at the warm and harmonious family of 4 in front of him. He smiled and said, "It's rare to have twins. It's a little late to say congratulations now." Feng Wu hugged her son and said with a smile, "It's not too late." At dinner, 6 people gathered around a table. Wang Leiwen glanced at Dao Tao and Susu. The 2 little guys were holding chopsticks and picking up food for themselves like adults. The more I thought about it, the more depressed I became. He came to Daxia with high hopes, but it turned out that Xiao Jinyan not only had a princess, but also a son and daughter. Even if she marries Xiao Jinyan now, it will be difficult for her to keep up with this speed. The dish was a little far away and Susu couldn't get it, so he immediately shouted in a milky voice, "Mom, the meat is better than the meat. Mom, I'll give it to you right now." Feng Wu put the chopsticks into the plate, picked up a 6y meatball and put it into the bowl in front of Susu. Knowing that her daughter liked it, she immediately picked up another one and put it in. Susu said with a smile, "Crab crab mom." Feng Wu asked her son, "Do you want Dao Tao?" Dao Tao nodded vigorously, "Mother and concubine, the nest comes second." Okay. Feng Wu also took 2 6y meatballs for his son. "Crab, crab, mother concubine." Dao Tao thanked him and took the 4 happiness meatballs from the bowl and put them into her mouth to eat. Xiao Jinyan picked up 2 for Feng Wu with chopsticks. Fortunately, 2 more plates of 4 happiness meatballs were made, otherwise there would not be enough. Feng Wu curved her eyebrows at Xiao Jinyan and started eating the 4 happiness meatballs. Wang Leiwen saw it and felt very depressed. He really couldn't stand the scene of picking up food. When Xiao Jinyu came, he saw a table of people eating. He looked at Feng Wu, "Sister-in-law, go see a Yan." Feng Wu raised her head and looked at Xiao Jinyu, "Is concubine Han still awake?" Xiao Jinyu said anxiously, "She is awake, but she can't eat." "Sister-in-law, go see her." Feng Wu glanced at the food on the table and followed Xiao Jinyu out cruelly. Before leaving, she reminded him, "Leave my portion of food for me, I'll come back and eat it." It's normal for concubine Han to be so weak now that she can't eat, but not eating will make her weaker. Feng Wu had no choice but to give concubine Han some appetite, so that her appetite would drive her desire to eat. Xiao Jinyu didn't eat dinner, and waited until the acupuncture was over, and tried to feed her with a bowl of rice. Seeing that she had eaten, she was slightly relieved. "Ayan, you have lost a lot of weight, you must eat more, understand?" Feng Wu looked at Xiao Jinyu's absent-minded look, and she remembered the flamboyant and lively Xiao Jinyu in the past. She still liked the old Xiao Jinyu better. Back to the East Palace, Feng Wu sighed after dinner. Wang Jingyuan was playing with Dao Tao and Susu. When he heard her sighing, he asked, "Did you encounter a problem?" Feng Wu nodded, "Yes, Prince Yu's concubine Han suddenly suffered from anemia, but the cause could not be found. She loses blood every day. She has taken a lot of medicine to nourish her body, but there is no solution." Wang Jingyuan asked, "Even you don't know the reason?" Feng Wu said, "If I knew, I wouldn't be here reading medical books and sighing." Wang Jingyuan pondered for a moment and said, "Could it be that she was poisoned by blood poisoning?" Feng Wu seemed to want to hear this. "What did she get up?" She put down the medical book and came to Wang Jingyuan, "Blood goo, what harm does it do to the person who was poisoned?" Wang Jingyuan explained, "Blood goo is planted in people, and it will absorb people's blood every day to nourish itself. The appetite will grow bigger and bigger. If it is not detoxified in time, there is only one way to go." Feng Wu said, "I have never found the reason. According to what you said, it is very likely that the blood goo was planted." She suddenly pressed Wang Jingyuan's shoulder and said, "Come with me to see concubine Han, you should be able to tell if it is a blood goo. Good night." Seeking monthly tickets and recommendation tickets for support. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 632. She remembered that Wang Jingyuan was a high-level Gu master and a very talented one. When the Miao tribe was promoted, he could easily help Xiao Jinyan remove the poison. In fact, as early as in the Nanzhao kingdom, Feng Guiyu knew that Wang Jingyuan was a Gu master. She often saw him playing with some bugs and would put them away when he saw her, saying that he was afraid of scaring her. She was only 6 years old at the time and thought that Gu insects were very scary things, so she never thought about watching them. Wang Jingyuan agreed to Feng Guiyu's request without even thinking, "Okay, I'll go with you to see it." Feng Guiyu was a little happy. Even though they had been separated for 10 years, they were still the same as before, and their relationship had not changed. "Thank you, brother A1." Susu was having fun when she saw Feng Guiyu was about to leave and stopped playing. She stepped forward and grabbed Feng Guiyu's sleeves, her pink face full of doubts. "Mama, are you going to Nailai?" Feng Guiyu knelt down in front of her daughter and explained in a gentle voice, "Mom is going to your Uncle Wang's place and will be back later. You should wash up and rest early. Mom will have someone make wontons for you tomorrow morning, okay?" When Susu heard about wontons, she became a little greedy and wished that they would arrive tomorrow. "I still want to have a little milk bag." Small milk buns are actually custard buns, meant for children to eat. When Chengzi made them, one was very small and had such a squishy little mouth that she could finish them in 2 bites, so they called them small milk buns. Feng Guiyu smiled and nodded, "No problem." Susu held Feng Guiyu's face with her 2 fleshy little hands and said, "Crab, crab, num." Wang Jingyuan looked at the scene in front of him and felt very warm. Who could imagine that after 10 years of separation, she was not only married but also had a son and a daughter. From the first time he saw Susu, he noticed that she looked very similar to Xiaju, and it reminded him of Xiaju, who was as cute and lovable as Susu when she was a child. They all like to eat and can't refuse delicious food. After Feng Guiyu comforted her daughter, she looked at Dao Tao again. "Dao Tao, you should go to bed early so that you can have the energy to study tomorrow, okay?" Dao Tao nodded obediently, "I know it's spicy, my concubine." Feng Guiyu looked at the 2 babies, they were smart and sensible. "So good." Dao Tao took Susu and said good night to Feng Guiyu, then went to find her grandma to wash up. Feng Guiyu then raised his head and looked at Wang Jingyuan with satisfaction, "Brother A1, let's go." Wang Jingyuan, "Okay." At this time, Qiancheng Hall. Wan Xian prepared wine and food and waited for Xiao Jinyu. "Master, the prince is at concubine Han's house right now. I'm afraid he won't have time to come over. The dishes will be cold if we wait any longer." "Why don't you have dinner first?" the maid reminded cautiously. Wan Xian raised her eyes and looked at the window. It was already dark outside. She was a little reluctant and said, "Wait a little longer." The maid didn't want to say anything anymore and just waited on the side in a polite manner. When Xiao Jinyu opened the curtain and came in, he saw Wan Xian sitting at the table. He glanced at the food in front of her and knew that she hadn't had dinner yet. He came after a Yan fell asleep. I've never seen Wan Xian, a woman with a gentle nature, do anything excessive. Forced by circumstances, she married into Qiancheng Palace, but he ignored her. After being reminded by the prince's brother yesterday, I became suspicious of Wan Xian. If she really harmed a Yan, he would not let her go even if Grandma Huang supported her. Wan Xian saw Xiao Jinyu coming and stood up happily to greet him, "Your Majesty, you are here." Xiao Jinyu nodded and said in a strange and indifferent tone, "Well, I kept you waiting for a long time." Wan Xian heard his indifferent tone without showing any expression on her face. She whispered softly, "What did the prince say?" "Concubine Han is ill. The prince is worried, but I can't relieve the prince's worries." It's because I am incompetent. Xiao Jinyu glanced at the food on the table, walked over and sat down on the stool. Ever since concubine Han fell ill, Xiao Jinyu had lost his appetite and couldn't eat more than a few bites at a time. Wan Xian moved lightly to Xiao Jinyu's side, opened the lid of the soup pot, took a small bowl, scooped some soup and placed it in front of Xiao Jinyu. I see that the prince has become thinner and thinner these days, and I feel very distressed. There is ginseng in this chicken soup, which can replenish your body. Xiao Jinyu ate very little today and was already hungry, but he had no appetite at all. He lowered his eyes and looked at the young man's chicken soup, which tasted delicious. You are interested, but I don't have the appetite right now. Wan Xian looked at Xiao Jinyu, who was losing weight, and advised her warmly, I know that the prince is worried about concubine Han, but the prince also has to worry about his own body. You have lost a lot of weight. If concubine Han sees that the prince is injured because of her, I will definitely feel sad physically. Seeing that Xiao Jinyu was indifferent, Wan Xian continued to persuade, if the prince falls, what will concubine Han do? She is still waiting for the prince. Xiao Jinyu was stunned for a moment when he heard this, thinking of a Yan who was getting thinner on the bed, and he couldn't chat with her properly in the past few days. Every time he said a lot, it took Ian a long time to reply. She just said one sentence, using all her strength. He picked up the small bowl in front of him, raised his eyes and glanced at Wan Xian, only to see her take another bowl, scoop out some soup, and then drink it in small sips. Then he felt relieved, picked up the celadone spoon, scooped a spoonful of chicken soup and put it into his mouth. The chicken soup was rich and he could taste the taste of ginseng. Wan Xian put down the bowl in her hand, picked up the chopsticks and served Xiao Jinyu with dishes. Your Highness, try this venison. Xiao Jinyu said calmly, I like to pick up my own food. Wan Xian put down the chopsticks in her hand, I overstepped my bounds. Xiao Jinyu put down the bowl in his hand, picked up the rice bowl, picked up some food with chopsticks, and ate some with the rice. Wan Xian watched Xiao Jinyu eating with a sense of casualness. Since he came back from the battlefield, she found that he was becoming more and more masculine. Xiao Jinyu took 2 mouthfuls of rice, raised his head and looked at Wan Xian, Wan concubine. Wan Xian asked softly, Your Majesty, what's wrong? Is the food not to your liking? Xiao Jinyu put down the bowls and chopsticks in his hands and raised his head to look at Wan Xian again. He had very little contact with Wan Xian and didn't know much about her. No, I think you have been wronged since you married into Qiancheng Palace. Wan Xian put down the chopsticks in her hand, stood up slowly and came to Xiao Jinyu's side, Your Majesty, I said that if you marry the prince, you will be his. If the prince feels that I have been wronged, can you stay here tonight? When Wan Xian came over, Xiao Jinyu smelled a fragrance. He also smelled the same fragrance when he was with a Yan, which made his mouth dry and his body warm. He raised his head and looked at the people around him, and in a trance he seemed to see a Yan, smiling at him. Wan Xian's hand rested on Xiao Jinyu's shoulder. The man's shoulders were stronger and wider than the woman's, which made people feel safe. Will you stay? Xiao Jinyu seemed to be bewitched. He put his arms around the waist of the person in front of him and brought the person into his arms with the force of his palms. Well. Wan Xian lay in Xiao Jinyu's arms, feeling Xiao Jinyu eagerly tugging on her belt, feeling a little expectant in her heart. As long as he consummates his marriage with Xiao Jinyu, he has no reason to drive her away. If she gets pregnant successfully, Xiao Jinyu will definitely focus on her. Xiao Jinyu buried himself in her neck, his big hands came to her waist, his voice was a little distressed, Ian, you have lost a lot of weight. Wan Xian was immersed in the strange emotions brought by the man. She suddenly opened her eyes and looked down at the man buried in front of her. He was clearly hugging her, but he was calling another woman's name. Ian. Xiao Jinyu picked her up, strode to the bed, put her down on the bed, and couldn't wait to pull her clothes. Wan Xian called out nervously, "Your Majesty." "Prince." Xiao Jinyu's hand was on the lace of his belly band when he suddenly heard the sound of prince and became conscious a little. He frowned, shook his head and looked at the person under him. When he saw the face underneath him clearly, he was stunned for a moment. "You are not a Yan." Xiao Jinyu's vision suddenly blurred. He hurriedly propped himself up on the bed. When he opened his eyes again, he saw Yan looking at him with a hint of seduction in her eyes. Wan Xian saw that Xiao Jinyu seemed to recognize her, so she ignored her shyness and reached out to pull his girdle. She pulled for a while but could not untie it. Xiao Jinyu felt extremely hot, and when that soft hand stretched out, it seemed to be filled with fire. When Feng Wei brought Wang Jingyuan to Qiancheng Hall, he didn't see Xiao Jinyu. She asked Ping the maid who had been serving concubine Han, "Where has King Yu gone?" Ping replied, "Back to the crown princess, the prince has gone to concubine Wan's side." A flash of doubt flashed in Feng Wei's eyes. "Didn't Xiao Jinyu never go to concubine Wan? How did you go today?" It's not easy for her to ask. Xiao Jinyu wanted to go, she couldn't stop her, right? There are also people who go there only when they have something to do. After shooing away Ping she led Wang Jingyuan into concubine Han's room. Inside the house, there was a light scent of incense burning, and the whistling wind outside could be heard quietly. Concubine Han, who was on the bed, had already fallen asleep. Due to severe blood deficiency, her face was as pale as a piece of paper, and she had lost a lot of weight. She raised her head and looked at Wang Jingyuan. "Brother A1, she is concubine Han. She has severe blood deficiency and has been relying on medicine to survive. Let me take a look." Wang Jingyuan walked to the bed and looked down at the person on the bed. He found that the woman on the bed had cold and delicate features, but she was not as delicate as a woman. As an outsider, he hesitated. "Xiaju, can you lift the quilt?" Feng Wei immediately understood what Wang Jingyuan was thinking. "I'll do it." In Feng Wei's eyes, concubine Han was a patient, and she and Wang Jingyuan were like doctors. When saving people, it was normal for them to take off each other's clothes. Feng Wei lifted the quilt, revealing concubine Han's thin body. The thin fabric stuck to her body, and her bones could be seen protruding. She had already lost such weight in just 10 days. She asked, "Do you want to take off your clothes?" "No need." Wang Jingyuan looked at concubine Han on the bed and found that she was not as short as a woman, but as slender as a man. He gathered his thoughts and began to examine her body. As a goo master, it is easy to detect goo insects. However, after a while, Wang Jingyuan discovered that there was a blood poison in concubine Han's body. There is indeed a blood goo in her body, and it has been in her body for at least 3 months. 3 months? That long? Feng Wei was so surprised. No wonder she couldn't check the cause. No matter how powerful the goo insect was, the doctor couldn't know it. This is the power of voodoo bugs. If voodoo bugs are used to harm people, no one will notice. Well, it may take longer. If it is 1 day late, it will be useless to cure the poison. Wang Jingyuan knows the blood poison too well, and 1 day's delay will be fatal. Upon hearing this, Feng Wei immediately walked to the door and told Ping "Go and call Prince Yu over and tell him that there is a way to cure concubine Han." "I'll go right away." Ping had been serving concubine Han. When she learned that concubine Han was saved, she ran out immediately. Feng Wei returned to the bed and asked, "Brother A1, do you need to prepare anything?" Wang Jingyuan said, "I came in a hurry this time and didn't bring much with me. I need to prepare temporarily. It won't take much time." Feng Wei breathed a sigh of relief. "That's good." Wang Jingyuan took out a bamboo tube and a wooden box from his sleeve pocket. These things were all carried with him. At this time, the lights in the room were dim, and the atmosphere of ambiguity was everywhere. Xiao Jinyu pushed the woman who was holding him away. "Don't touch me." As soon as he pushed away, he fell on the bed. Seeing this, Wang Zhen was unwilling to give up and entangled with him again, with her white arms around his neck. "My lord, I will help you, and you won't feel uncomfortable if I help you." Xiao Jinyu frowned fiercely. He didn't hear what Wang Zhen said clearly. The fragrance at the tip of his nose became stronger and stronger, making him dry and thirsty, and he wanted to hug the person in his arms. The only thing left in his mind was to push the woman away. "Jinyu, I am your An, feel it and see if it is your An." When Xiao Jinyu heard the word An, he paused in pushing her away. An. When he faced An, he had no resistance at all. The other party was An, and his body instinctively wanted to get close to her and hug her tightly as usual. Wang Zhen noticed Xiao Jinyu's actions and felt that he was hugging her, and that hand began to move. She was a little happy in her heart, happy that she could finally consummate the marriage with Xiao Jinyu. But she was still dissatisfied in her heart, and she had to consummate the marriage with Xiao Jinyu under the name of another person. Thinking that in Xiao Jinyu's eyes, she was now in love with her beloved concubine Han, the jealousy in her heart could not be concealed. However, concubine Han would not live for 2 days. When concubine Han died, Xiao Jinyu would forget her. From now on, Xiao Jinyu will only have her as a woman. They can develop feelings for each other over time, or even have a child. Anyway, no one can compete with her for Xiao Jinyu. The queen likes Xiao Jinyu so much. If she can give birth to a child, she can be the queen. The reason why she is so eager to consummate the marriage with Xiao Jinyu is that she is afraid that Xiao Jinyu will be depressed and sad after the death of concubine Han. During this period, she will not consummate the marriage with her, which will be difficult. It is the most appropriate time to consummate the marriage. If Xiao Jinyu had not suddenly gone to Mobei, she might have consummated the marriage with Xiao Jinyu a long time ago, and she might even have a child. Wang Zhen's hand came to Xiao Jinyu's waist again, pulling the waist belt. I don't know if it's because she is anxious or what, but she can't pull it open. She can feel Xiao Jinyu. Good night. Please support with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets.